Live.
The live stream chat will not actually be in the final video.
Yep.
So when you find someone asks a question, you need to read the question and then answer it.
Yep.
Come on.
Seems to be up and running.
What's up?
Hey, the Wild Cody appears.
Will not actually.
I woke up 20 minutes ago. I'm kind of hungover.
Of course you are.
Yep.
We're also live streaming, so whatever.
Read the question and answer it. Yep.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. Which is to say that everyone just heard you say that.
Yep.
Hi. What? I mean, it's Sunday. I'm young. It's Saturday. It exists. It's a thing. So is Advil.
Fair enough.
Advil and cold showers.
Mm-hmm.
Probably want to repost that YouTube link just in case.
It's okay, there's only 8 people watching right now, so we're cool.
And 6 of those are us.
Sounds like a frat party.
Bad one.
That's so bad. I'm gonna mute till I'm awake.
Probably a good idea.
So, Thom asks the release date. We have no solid date. We're hoping for next month.
Yeah, we're looking at the end of August right now. That is our goal. But it's kind of in flux right now as we kind of sort things out.
And it ultimately depends on how quickly China gets us the books. So, as we have updates once we send it off to print, we will update everyone on that progress.
All right, so just to let y'all know who are in the chat there. We'll be taking all your questions that you ask for the next, well, I guess it'd be 4 hours now, roughly.
Yeah.
Or until we're out of questions. And answering them to the best of our ability. And we will actually be, as said in the beginning of the stream, we're going to be repeating the question that you put so that the stream can hear it afterwards for posterity's sake.
There's another one. Zip, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go for it, Zip.
So, Christopher Smith asks, Dudettes, how did y'all meet and get together for this endeavor? Well, It's been kind of a building process. We started out with 4 of us back in, oh goodness, it was probably 2000,
2010.
yeah, 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And then probably about 6 months later, we brought a few more people on, and then a few more people on, and we've had people come and go ever since. But we've been doing this for roughly 6 years, and we all met on our Skype tabletop gaming group.
That's pretty good, succinct version of having to
Go into extreme detail.
gory details.
Yeah.
Needless to say, there were definite bumps in the road.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
We have lost people along the way. One of the first 4 founding people just ran out of time, but we've definitely had help along the way. Not to mention from all the backers with their monsters and NPCs. Oh yeah, Road to Furies, says that for a way to meet a group and create a new system by playing a game, you'll have true gamers. That well, thank you first off, but all of us have at least played a couple tabletop games.
He means a couple actually different types.
Yeah, different types.
2 campaigns.
Yeah, they're different systems. Different systems.
Yeah, we totally got together just for oh, let's play Pathfinder or D&D. That's it. Nothing
No, we
else. We
played,
have no experience with anything else.
Now we've played quite a few other ones. Okay. Road to Fury asks, I was wondering what is each of y'all's favorite aspect of the game you created thus far? I guess I'll start. Mine personally are the vampires, because I
made
created
them.
most of it. They're my babies. I love how I made them very dark and animalistic sometimes, and other times they're quite light and airy, depending on the Vampire Coven, which would be equivalent to a clan.
Please don't get it started on vampires.
Oh god.
That's what I'm making nice and short.
I think my favorite part of the game was something I had written up way back in the day. Was the fear system. I really, coming from playing games where fear is a big element, like Call of Cthulhu, I really love the opportunity for players to have to wrestle with their characters losing their minds. So fear was the way to inject insanity into the game. And so yeah, that's probably my favorite.
Well, I absolutely love the races, but as for like actual character progression, I'm actually pretty fond of the martial arts system.
It's a good one.
It leaves a lot for style and development of your character.
Well, I guess it leaves it on my turn. So for me, probably the favorite thing that I've created in the game or worked on with the game is getting really down into it with Lith, into the number systems, the nitty gritty, doing like brute force calculations.
Always
So
fun to
many
do
brute
math.
force.
Well, tell
Number
us
theories.
tell us about your brute force calculations?
As a personal thing, I'm going to school for computer science, and I learned Java and data structures, so I had to write a program for our multi-die system to brute force calculate every single possible roll and store the data to compare it against every single possible roll from every die combination in the game, every +1 combination in the game, and then create statistical outcomes for every die roll versus every die roll. And personally, the satisfaction of getting that massive database correct was awesome. But I definitely like having to sit there and go through and balancing like the crafting system as well, because that's a little bit more tangibility that everyone can use. But that was definitely what I take the most pride in as a developer.
Sure. I think my favorite part, I've always been a world builder. That's always been the most interesting to me. So definitely loved being able to create something unique and something original. And of course, there are always going to be those tropes that are prevalent in pretty much all forms of fiction, but still having that chance to kind of put your twist on things and really get into what makes people and what makes a world unique. That's definitely been the most fun part of the game.
I'd say for me, the monster creation system, that was a really good one for me to create in this system. It was just one of those nights where the stars happened to align, and I just was like, you know what? We need this. And after 7 hours, a skeleton had formed of it, and then after much more time after that, a nice fleshed out version was created.
All right, the next two questions are roughly the same. Shai Costo and Thom Shardle have both asked roughly, what are we going to do after the book is published?
Drink.
Celebrate.
Drink. Okay.
Pre-gamer up in the house.
Yeah.
That's marketing.
Marketing, promoting the book. You mean as in additional projects? I imagine that if Chatter goes off as well as I hope it does, and as well as it currently is, there'll most likely be some sort of expansions. But first, we got to publish it and market it and sell it.
And yeah, get
After
them off the shelves.
Yeah, get them off the shelves. And once that starts going, we'll think about other projects. I know other things in the bag, but nothing that's concrete.
There is some proposed stuff. Like, I, for one, would love to see a ton more monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we definitely have some
having an entire
thoughts.
book of monsters is like, well,
Yeah.
you need an actual system for that.
I mean, that was also one of our ideas for a stretch goal for the Kickstarter, but we didn't make it.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, to echo everyone else, we've got lots of ideas for other things to bring into the world and the game. There's been talk of, card games or board games, or what kind of areas do we have interest in, pursuing. I know immediately after we'll probably be focusing on the marketing, like Tex said. Personally, I'm going to be trying to get a children's book published once Shattered is done and in all of your hands. So.
Wait, a Shattered children's book?
No, not related to Shattered.
That would be amazing.
Conflicting ideas going
And
on.
Ragnarok will be down to sleep.
Never dark enough.
Never
Like
Dark Enough presents a children's story. Wait, what?
As in Okay.
The
Um,
Things Beyond the Door, Part 1.
So,
so
so go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna read the next question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, me too.
So we have Christopher Smith here asking as the follow-on to Call of Cthulhu references. What systems would we say were most influential to us in building Shattered? I think I'm probably the one with some of the least diverse gaming experience. However, that being said, I would say the D20 system definitely influenced my desire to seek out something different. And I couldn't find anything I liked, so I came on hoping to make something we liked to play.
I always bounced in and said something like, well, if somebody proposed something and be like, D&D did this specific thing like this, let's steer completely away from that. Not that they were always bad or anything, it was just something to try and like sail around and avoid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that pretty much covers it in terms of, well, when we get down to the numbers and the crunch. We didn't like the D20 system unanimously, almost. And we wanted to make something that we felt like would express that scale, that development of skill and progress over time better than the D20 system we felt did.
To
and
be
then
fair,
obviously,
some of us do really enjoy playing D20 games, but systematically.
Oh yeah, absolutely
I
enjoy
completely
playing
agree with
D20
Conrad.
system. Yeah, no, I mean I'm playing Pathfinder right now, but I mean I feel like the goal was to do a better job of expressing that development.
Yep. I know. Aside from just all of the stuff about D&D and Pathfinder and other D20 based games, I know I had a lot of influence in fiction primarily. Lots of H.P. Lovecraft, and lots of I really enjoyed Jim Butcher as an author. And then on the tabletop side, I came from playing Warhammer 40K.
Yes.
And really loving falling in love with the fluff of that world that Games Workshop created, and loving just the bleakness of living in the 40K universe. And so that definitely played a role in how I wrote and the ideas that I had for Shattered.
For me, I'm more of a world, or we call it fluff guy, rather than systems. But I know I was heavily influenced by Warhammer 40K and some extent the Firefly RPG. And then, yeah, Jim Butcher, I'm a fan as well. But partially from the bleakness of a lot of the more dystopian books and tabletops is ones that I've played I've really liked. That's where I've got most of my influences for the world and the systems itself.
Yeah, I know a few of us are all really big fans of Eclipse Phase. If you guys have never played that, you definitely should. It's complicated character building, but the world that they've built is fantastic.
It's beautiful.
I know for me, influences just come from everywhere. The monster creation system was actually conceived from us playing Final Fantasy RPG. They had a pretty interesting take on how to build the creatures from that, and I kind of ran with it to create our own loosely based on that, and it was pretty amazing. After what came out.
Next question I saw here was also from Christopher Smith. Aside from social networking, how can they help how can you guys help with marketing and getting the word out? we've got a couple of things, some resources that we have put together for people in the past when they've, specifically asked us. We don't actually have it available currently. That's a shortcoming on my part. I'll gather together some of those resources. We have some printouts and some 3x5 card printouts that we put together and stuff. I'll get those resources together, the images for them. I'll put them up in a zip file and make sure everyone knows where to get it off of our website.
I'd also say just play the game. Go to comic shops, play the game. Go to cons, play the game. Tell your friends. All this other social networking would be to, play the game. Tell us what you love about it. And,
I think what he's trying to say is that you need to play the game. That's it.
possibly.
Nothing more, nothing less.
I mean, there's nothing better you can do than share the game with people who haven't played it yet. So, I mean, that's really probably the best answer. Beyond social
Pretty much
networking
how-
is networking socially in the stores, playing the game.
Go to your local hangouts. Play the game.
Yeah.
Peddle it like a drug. Except it's legal.
Yeah.
Go to shady back rooms and be like, hey, you want to play a game?
It's fitting. It might be dark enough in there.
Yeah. Well done.
So the next question is from Rhoda Fury. Yes. Do we play our own system, or after X amount of time with it, we're tired of it, want to play other systems, or it's some sort of a mix? Well,
When was
I
the
hate
last
to
time
say
we
it,
played, fellas?
we haven't really played the game in a while because we've been so busy developing, but we have done both in the past.
With mixed results, because you do a session and it's like, oh, that system changed last week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
that
it's a
was probably
stress test
yeah.
to just go rip something up.
So I suppose the long and short answer to the question is we really enjoy playing our game, but we can't tell you how much time it takes to get tired of it because we haven't played it enough.
That's a fair
It's not
answer.
played enough.
Yeah.
We'll be, from sitting from the developer seat, once we catch, something that might be off or something that isn't working quite right, we'll get derailed from actually playing the game to go fixing the problem we found. So, playing Shattered for us takes a lot longer than we'd like.
I mean, our games start in a bar and they end with us changing over 17 systems.
Yeah. You get a 4-hour session with 20 minutes of gameplay.
That happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That has happened
especially when there's rule mongers in a game where everybody that's playing has made.
We've made all the rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
I don't
God.
like this rule that you created.
That is
I want to change it.
That's
There ends up
happened.
being a couple of the arguments.
Start quoting each other and realizing the game was big enough that we didn't have the whole thing memorized. Like, wait, hold on, what?
Wait, I said that? Are you sure?
That's when we realized, like, man, we really made a game. We're making it and can't even memorize the whole game yet or anymore. Like,
Well,
Uh-oh.
yeah, and because it's constantly in flux. So I mean, like
Yeah.
airships right now, it's been one of the biggest projects right now, and world building, and so they've been going on side by side, and so we've usually been splitting up. So like, I'll quote a rule in airships. People are like, "Wait, that's a thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a." Never mind. We'll talk about it later.
I know we just wrote. These rules were just created, but I don't remember that. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Looks like the next question we had was, what would be your favorite monsters of the world? From Daniel White. I'm probably gonna be a little narcissistic because I made this monster, but I'm a huge fan of the Sandman. The Sandman essentially is this pretty tough monster, roughly humanoid, wanders the Ashlands, but he only comes out at night, kind of fitting with the Sandman lore of our own world. And he's kind of a children's tale, like the mothers tell their children, like, don't misbehave or I'll leave you outside camp, for the Sandman to come and get you. But he's a very real thing, and he feeds upon the psychic energies of other creatures. and so he's a very powerful psychic that prefers to strike while his opponents sleep, kind of where the name the Sandman comes from.
So, all the monsters are my babies. I have no real favorite, but if I were to name one, it'd be probably the Mechani Diver. It's the oldest of our creatures that we've created, and it just it gets better every time. Like every time that we've we've changed the monster system, I've had to change how the creature plays out, and it's gotten better every single time. Just the fact that we've essentially created mechanical vulture-like things that have a pack-like hunting behavior, and it's just terrifying to hear these mechanical wings flapping and just know that your death is imminent.
We actually had a few more monsters that we were adding description of, but I'm still really, really partial to the sepsis, just because it's insidious and how it attacks and how it spreads, and just the thought of it is pretty terrifying, especially for just something that's a parasite.
Alright, I guess I'm the narcissistic. Or my favorite's going to be the Celesti. It just follows the party, harassing it with lots of insanity and just driving them nuts. And once it feels it's like finally it's done toying with the group, it just goes in and just destroys everything in sight. And then sits out in the field waiting for the next group to just come by and pique its interest.
Yeah, I think my my favorite monster right now is jeez, there's so many of them. Like what Liz said, there's almost too many to choose from. But I think my favorite right now is probably going to be the Spine Wretch. We did a live stream, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so with Crystal, who was doing the artwork for the Spine Wretch. And
Yes.
it's just, I'll see if I can get a picture up here in the stream so everyone can see it. But it's this terrifying creature once it's actually done what it's supposed to do. Starts off as like this little tiny like parasitic worm that latches onto you, and in a very short span of time it encompasses your whole body and reconstitutes parts of your body to suit its needs, but it keeps you alive to feed off of the electrical impulses coming out of your spinal column. So you'll have spine wretches, slithering around with anywhere between 6 to 10 or more heads in it, just kind of like screaming out nonsensical, words and such like that, all together, and it's a
I'll throw a
terrifying.
link up in the chat.
Thanks. It's a terrifying thing for me to, think that something like that out there could just like absorb me into itself. So it's probably my favorite one.
My favorite would be Absolok, written by a dear friend of ours, Ed Zero, who is happily married and doesn't have as much time as he'd like for games anymore. But he basically made it as this terrifying nightmare creature. We've modified it a bit since he wrote it to be basically the nightmare of the vampire race. And he throws some serious crap at vampires, especially because he essentially can create ultraviolet light, which those of you who have read the races can kill a vampire pretty easily. So our next question, actually, I'm going to combine 2 questions into one. Road of Fury asks about aircrafts, airships, basically, in flying combat. And Shai Costo asks, will there be ground vehicles?
The
Yes,
answer
ground
is
vehicles.
yes.
And air combat, that'd be more Conrad's thing, but we're still working on it.
Yeah.
Almost done.
So, yeah, to get into it, yes, there will be ground vehicles. We've got some motorcycles. We've got some, your basic caravan carriages, those sorts of things on the ground side. Some
Tanks.
steam and diesel punk, inspired vehicles. As far as air combat, airships is nearly wrapped up, and the air combat I'm really looking forward to because we did a really good job, I feel, of making sure that every type of character will have a role on the ship. To kind of give you the basics, essentially the ship is run by typically we think the players who will be the officers on the ship, and then crew, which is going to be filled by NPCs. And so the officers take various roles, such as flying the ship, uh, firing the guns, and we even actually created devices for the psychics and arcanists to use, which will amplify their powers and give them some new, really cool abilities in combat, such as allowing necromancers to revive dead NPCs on an opponent's ship to then attack the living NPCs. So that function was really cool. And then there's actually a role for the captain, and the captain will basically be in charge of kind of making sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to, getting the resources they need to do the things he needs them to do, and then supporting the morale. And morale is kind of the airship version of fear. As morale decreases, it'll get to a point where the crew starts wanting to mutiny, and if they mutiny, all hell breaks loose.
All right. Next question is from Road of Fury. He said, "We believe one of us talked about children's book. I don't know if Zip was an author or inspiring one, and would we consider writing a book in the Shattered World, or have others do so?"
Hell yes.
As for the books, I've been dabbling writing my own book, following one of the characters I made up, which is briefly mentioned in the actual book itself, in the Shattered Core book.
She's actually right there on the stream.
That's the well, no, not that one. That sort of that one too, but yeah, words. Sorry. I'm planning on writing a book eventually. It just obviously got paused because of, well, the core book's a bit more important. As for having others do so, yeah, if it's fan fiction and it's for free, that's fine. If you want to sell your book, give us a ring. We'll talk.
Yeah.
David South asked, "Is Shattered 2.0 a possibility if the game is successful?" Personally, I would never want to have to rewrite our rules completely, but if that's a possibility because of something, then it may be. I'd rather have expansions before writing a 2.0 version, but if you mean like a partial rewrite because of there needs to be a reprint due to printing issues, not printing issues, but like misspellings and whatnot needed for errata, then that could happen.
Probably not so much 2.0 as just, like 1.5's expansions. That's the most likely scenario right now, because we already have ideas and thoughts on things to add. It's just there's so much extra that could potentially be put into it. We wind up with a 12,000 page book or something, or at this rate probably 1,200, and that's just kind of out of the question.
All right. Anybody else for that one?
No, I think you guys covered it pretty well.
Next
I
question.
mean, I'd love to write. I'm not sure if I have anything in mind for the Shattered World, but I mean, I definitely feel like we have every intent of expanding on the lore through one means or another. And definitely, I think we'd love to have kind of like how Warhammer, 40K, and all those others have their own literary universe. We would love to have that, but we haven't really looked into it too much.
David South asks, the current playtest mentions dragons, special reference to shades. That explains what dragons are. What are they, and how do they fit in the world of Shattered?
So, dragons has been one of those kind of an odd thing in our game ever since the beginning. We knew they were there, and we never actually sat down to kind of put the word to a form, if you will. But dragons now are extremely powerful sentient beings that escaped through the opening portal during the reckoning. As the portal was opening up to let Ragnarok cross over, they managed to, or at least some of them managed to escape into our world before it collapsed. They're aggressive in as much as, you know, they kill to, you know, survive or kill to protect like any other animal would, but they're not like I wouldn't go as far as to say that they're like starting wars or anything like that to conquer. But beyond that, you know, we honestly don't have much on them. We have dragon whelps, the young version of them, as a monster available, but beyond that, not much, unfortunately.
Kind of want to
Smith?
leave them. We kind of want to leave them as a mystery to discover, and let GMs develop their own stories as to how these dragons interact with the rest of the world. And it's one of those things I'll be interested to see how it plays out.
Well, I think it's important to recognize the fact that our intent for them was always to be. I mean, we have 4 types of monsters: Grunt, Hardened, Lord, Remnants. We always imagined dragons almost being their own class, almost being more powerful than even some of these most ancient creatures, just being massive leviathans of unthinkable power. And so to try and then quantify that in our book, we found was becoming very difficult. And so we're leaving them intentionally vague for the time being, for story reasons, but also for those mechanical reasons.
All right. Christopher Smith asked, do you have a mechanism in mind for how folks can contribute to the open gaming environment you're espousing? We will. It's going to be based with the forums, most likely, but we have several ideas how we're going to do it. Nothing concrete yet because we're trying to finish the book first. There's been talk about like free expansions with player-driven material, submission system where people can vote on what they like the best, homebrew section on the forums, things that people can get together and just make themselves, collaborate on, and make something great in the world. So this can be not just our world, but yours too.
Yeah, and that's about where the vision for that ends, at least until we get the book released. You know, once that's done and we start kind of working on anything for, you know, as long as we have, it's gonna be kind of weird not having to work on it once this is done. So we'll be kind of picking up the pieces, so to speak, and figuring out what our next step is, especially in regards to the kind of like the open development, open world building thing that we've talked about in the past.
Okay, next one is Order of Fury says, I had a character concept and I was wondering if I could do it, a necromancer swordsman and bone manipulate. Able to create weaponry from his enemy's bones and letting the Stitch shoot them out at like spines or shoot them to his master to fight with.
That's a neat idea. The current rules for Stitches that you guys have seen in the playtest, obviously is very limited. Doesn't necessarily allow for something like that. But that said, we over the past couple of weeks we have rebuilt the Stitch building system for necromancers from the ground up. It's considerably more
Awesome.
but it's also more open, and it revolves around harvesting parts from enemies you've killed, and then using said parts to put your Stitch together. Now, as far as the fluff of what your Stitch looks like, or if it's throwing something to your character, what it is, or how that functionality works, is completely up to you to describe. But we made it a lot more open to add certain abilities and things like that.
All right, next question is from Christopher Smith. He asked, do you folks have a solid lore around what the Ellipse actually did to destroy the world?
Yes. If you guys want, I can answer that.
Always scroll back up to my comment from a couple days ago.
Okay. So all of this began when Ragnarok started psychically reaching out across the void between his reality and our reality, and started to I don't know if convert is the word I'd want to pick, but started to amass a cult around his psychic image, as it were. And over many, many years, this cult, who called themselves the Ellipse, grew in size to be millions of members, size of what we would consider to be a nation, and all of them gathered themselves together and chose their own way to kill themselves in a mass ritual suicide, everybody doing it a little bit differently. And the effect of the ritual was going to tear a hole in reality and allow Ragnarok to cross through. That didn't happen because some of the methods of suicide that were chosen didn't work. Or for some reason, certain things that should have killed some of the Ellipse didn't. And because that failed, all of that pent-up energy from the ritual got released back onto the planet. It reverberated back out and wrecked all the havoc that we've talked about before, flipped tectonic plates, boiled the oceans away and replaced them with molten rock, and also, probably most importantly, imbued the physical, natural elements of the world with magical properties, which is how magic also came into the world.
Not gonna lie, being a geologist, I twitch every time he says that last statement.
And then we simply just say,
no,
magic!
No, that doesn't happen. No! But it's magic. Magic.
Yeah, every time he freaks out. Magic. It's okay.
Yep.
Anything that we can't explain with science, we just kind of say magic. And then we actually have long discussions about the actual science behind
Yes.
it.
Yeah, Christopher,
And in the end,
was
we're just like, magic!
It was very much inspired by the Jim Jones suicide cult and things like that, just on a much larger scale, and obviously some more fantasy kind of elements.
Right. But I mean, to really get into just how deeply impactful, it wasn't just Ellipse, and it wasn't just the magic. I mean, it goes even deeper than that, because the Rekindled. There were no Rekindled prior to the Reckoning. Those magical forces, when they came into Fenris, I mean, they're the whole reason that the Rekindled exists. They're the whole reason, people had to go into hiding. Like, it's what set the stage for literally everything, and it's the pinnacle of the whole era that's come to be now.
Yeah, well said.
All right, next question from Joseph Thompson. He asks, are there any plans for additional supplements down the line? Yes. Assuming everything goes well with the launch and getting things moved off the shelves.
Yes, off the shelves. Sell, sell, sell.
Yeah, we definitely do have. We've got. I don't want to go into too much detail about some of the ideas that we've had, but we've got a few potential supplements to look into down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with 6 years of development altogether, there's been a lot of ideas that have floated around, and there's a lot.
For example, way back when, probably about 2013 or so, we had this mini alpha playtest with some of our friends and acquaintances. They still had a magic school in there called Transmutation. Our good buddy Phil found the best loophole he could possibly find and turned a bunch of sand into a diamond wall. And that's when we knew we had to scrap Transmutation. Because he was basically turning everything into diamonds.
So we're kind of stuck here. There's an entire army, and we're going to go underground. I'm going to transmute a tunnel for us. What?
Yep. Yeah, this one said our rules were a bit too vague there.
That said, he did do something awesome, and he transmuted the air inside people's lungs into sand. It was wonderful, but yeah, it was too open at the time.
It was. I mean, if anybody's seen like Full Metal Alchemist, it was pretty open for what you could do, and it's just that kind of setting. It's overpowered like crazy.
So that was tabled and put into the dark abyss.
It's actually one of the proposed additions we have to the game. Is someone a couple years ago, I think 2014 or early 2015, on the forums had said something about how we could do something, and it might be a way to do it. We'll just have to see how it goes when we actually get back to the point of making new magic systems.
Or adding new magic schools.
Yeah.
Which we certainly intend to do if we can.
Yeah. Next question is from Rhoda Fury. Most of the races are humans who have evolved in different ways, right, or were created by them, correct? Is there much of people only non-human ones? Yes.
Yes.
Drones are transhumanists who survived the fall, basically.
I mean, we might as well describe where they all came from. Really get into it.
Yeah.
Take the whole question front with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Take it away, sir.
Oh, all right. Well, we already covered the Ellipse. The humans are pretty self-explanatory. They're just the least mutated version of what we once were. So they're still easily recognizable physically, mentally.
Dirty humans.
Yeah. We covered the Rekindled briefly. They're essentially, that sheer force of will on the brink of death that were able to bring themselves back together, if, somewhat piecemeal, and continue living without their memories, without who they were, except maybe bits and pieces. Tex, you want to cover vampires?
Sure. So vampires were the. I'll try to make this short because I have a lot of vampire in my head, but they were essentially the nobles the rich people, the elite from before the Reckoning. And being, the snobby jerks they are, they decided they wanted to be as far from the surface as possible. So, in their infinite wisdom, they were the deepest in the tunnels. And in that area, that's where they became mutated by magics and toxins and leaking and what have you. Form them into creatures that are to being a subrace of humans that can no longer withstand ultraviolet rays. And they use their ability to feed off the blood of other races to sustain them from walking out in the sunlight, or not sunlight, walking out into the UV radiation, without basically dying and falling over dead. So yeah, that's about it for vampires. I think for the short version.
They're pretty prolific since their emergence from their original home. Since they came back to the surface, they've established covens in most of the major cities and some other key locations around the world, and have their hands in all kinds of things, from trade to politics to human trafficking, etc.
They're just wonderful stand-up citizens.
To kind of combine this question with one that was already asked, someone asked about the drone lore changing. It did change. It was a hard change for us to make, but we were having difficulty going through the full explanation, kind of rationalizing it to ourselves, that whole origin story and how they went from being those sorts of slaves to being the free-willed people that they are now. So the drones, as they stand now, they were transhumanists prior to the Reckoning. And so, for those of you who don't know what transhumanism is, it's essentially the idea and the belief that we can transcend our biological limitations through synthetics and through augmentation, of non-biological means. Basically, cyborgs, androids, those sorts of non-organic enhancements. And so they were studying these things prior to the Reckoning, and as the Reckoning came around, they fled to their primary bastion, which I think we named the Transept. And it was basically this huge hub, almost like a church, this massive place where they would all gather and discuss and study. They began rapidly undergoing and enhancing these procedures that they've been working on. And they had all this time during the Reckoning and those millennia after to kind of get down and hone these processes to the point where they were able to become almost entirely non-biological. And that is what the drones are today. And so through that process, they lost a lot of their humanity, becoming these non-humans essentially, and trying to become superior to what they once were. And so it's really changed them a lot. But it sounds like Zip wants to add something.
No, I wasn't going to add anything to that. You think you pretty
No?
much summed it up. Yeah, you did fine. We next had the wretched, who are in a way an antithesis to humans being that are the least mutated. Wretched are probably the most mutated of all the races. So much so that every wretched may have a different set of mutations, and the only thing that sets them, that considers them one separate race is just the sheer number that each of them have. But they exist in a very kind of warrior tribal society where the strongest is always at the head of each group, and the weakest die or are kept and sold into slavery, or they're taken to once yearly event where they're forced to fight in a death pit of sorts. The victor, eventually being able to come back to freedom and start their own line, or join another one.
Sweet. Then we have the Florvana, which the question alluded to. Yes, they are entirely non-humanoid. Well, not non-humanoid. You know what I mean? They're not humans.
Yep.
They are this combination of the Reckoning's magic and fungi that were growing in the waters beneath Locaran, the city that has the largest source of pure water. And they were kind of developing down there, and with the magic and everything, they kind of grew into this sentient fungal hive mind, and started producing, and growing. And its first contact with humans, there's this very monstrous appearance, and it really upset a lot of people. But it was kind of more of a culture shock than an actual conflict. And over time, the Florvana, to kind of ease relations, started mimicking the human form, so that they could fit in at least a little bit better than they would have if they had not tried to do so. And that's why you have those, if you've seen the Florvana character art, so they have those very human forms, but it's also very natural. They have the bark, the mushrooms, the fungi, and those sorts of elements. You kind of still tie them back to their roots. Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. Let's see, and that covers most except for the Shade, I believe. And so the Shade are the race that have been growing up in the Glass Forest. The Glass Forest is basically you know better than I do.
Yeah, Glass Forest is a region on the eastern side of the continent, where molten rock had cooled very, very quickly, and it ultimately created these giant obsidian spikes. Some as some as large as skyscrapers, others as big as any rock you'd see walking down a path or down the street or anything like that. All of them razor sharp edges, very dangerous. And the people who took refuge here initially sought refuge from not only the Reckoning, but the dragons that they were encountering, which had kind of nested in a nearby region. So living in and amongst all of these obsidian spires, they were slowly influenced in that they, their voices were lost. They eventually mutated and gained the ability for limited telepathy. And in addition to that, just living amongst all of these razor-sharp rocks everywhere, they had to adapt to become very nimble, very quick. So that's how we have the Shade today. I don't know if you had anything else to add, Conrad, to that.
No, I did not.
All right. Next question is, Fury mentioned that I said about the magic systems. We're reworking the magic systems, or adding new magic systems. We just finished reworking necromancy, the stitches more specifically, but new magic systems would be in future expansions. At least that's the plan. David South asks, can you guys go into more detail about the mechanical giants?
Yeah, so obviously, like we just explained, the drone lores changed. But they were pre-reckoning large war machines, essentially. And since the drone lores changed, obviously they are not those servants that served the giants, but they still existed. So we haven't actually come up with a name, and we haven't retconned that piece of the lore just yet. So they're still kind of in flux. The best way I could describe them, essentially, is if you've ever watched any mecha, that's probably the best way to go. Just lumbering behemoths meant for the sole purpose of destruction.
and no whiny pilots.
Or
But it looks like you skipped it.
if any of you are, yeah, possibly. If any of you are familiar enough with the 40K Warhammer 40K universe, the Titans of the Imperium would also be a good example.
Or if you have ever watched, Big O, that's a pretty good apt sizing of them.
All right. Next question is. Oh, I missed one. Shai Costo asks, is there the Lord creature that a mastermind answers to, or is it the second command? It's more like, so the Grunt, the Hardened, and the Lords are all veterans. Sorry, we changed that. My bad. They're all pretty much lackeys to the mastermind, whereas the Remnants are more like creatures who make deals with. You basically pay them something, mastermind pays them something, or as a similar exchange, and that monster does something for the mastermind. They don't actually control the remnants.
I'll see if I can give an example. So your mastermind, first of all, it doesn't necessarily have to be an actual creature, but it is a foundation for you to build all the stats for the other creatures. So technically speaking, you could have a lord or remnant as your air quotes big baddie, your final enemy, or you could have it be the mastermind. It's up to you. But so in the sense that the mastermind is your final enemy, you'd have your grunts, which would be your foot soldiers, typically, or various low-level monsters that they'll encounter throughout the campaign. Your veterans then would be your next in line, your sergeants, say in a military, or those well-trained assassins. Those people who have skills that set them apart from the average fighter. And then moving into lords, those are going to be your elite troops, who've fine-honed their skills, who are usually better equipped, and would include, say, their right-hand man or something to that effect. Whereas the remnants would be, say, your mastermind managed to summon an ultimate power, or make a deal, like Tex said, with one of these dark forces. But typically speaking, these remnants are not bound by an allegiance or anything. They're essentially, powers of their own, forces of nature in the world that still roam according to their own whims.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up, I think.
Christopher Smith asks, do you have a favorite marshal from the game you've played? I'll leave that to Conrad.
Oh boy.
Let's see if I can go dig up the
trial.
Let me see if I can go
Martial
dig
trial,
up the picture of him.
You can. He was in the original 4. So it says Martial Trial, and I'll cover that question in a second. But since Tex brought it up, this is how I got into Shattered. Actually, was Tex asked me to run a playtest game because I hadn't quite joined the team yet, but they were sharing it with me. So I said, okay, I'll run a test game. And one of the guys, one of my players, ran an Ellipse Marshal of Love. And this was ironic to us for a number of reasons, mainly because Ellipse are not loved by anyone. And that an Ellipse would have love for anyone outside their own race is not necessarily rare, but, contrary to the stereotype. That's the best way to put it. And he decided that his primary weapon would be his Whip of Love, which you can see there in the image. And that's his character was actually kind of what we based this image off of. And so he ran through the entire campaign using his Whip of Love. It was just crazy. He essentially carried the team because his charisma score was so high. So he'd talk them out of trouble, and he'd whip them out of anything that he couldn't talk his way through. And it was really just a phenomenal experience to have such a quirky character that defied the stereotype and just made the play that much more fun. But as for the actual question, if we had any martial trials that are our favorite, I don't think anybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone here has run a game that had a martial trial yet.
No.
Doesn't sound like it.
No,
but I
not
do
to my
believe
knowledge.
Lost has been working a lot on some martial lore. Lost, do you have any trials that are really interesting?
The trials actually is something I really didn't get into for the lore aspect. That was always something that I think we left open for most of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. So to answer your question, I know we don't really have an example. Sorry.
Well, for the most part, that was something we wanted to keep a little open for GM usage. If, say, you wanted to do a campaign of where everybody becomes a marshal of something, the GM could do the trial for it how he wanted.
True. I think we had a couple examples though in the cults. Let me see if I can find one.
You're never gonna find it. I don't know.
While you're trying to find one, I'll go move to the next question just momentarily.
Go ahead.
Roto Fury asked about be able to start the game as a human, but keep getting limb replacements and becoming a drone. That'd be a DM choice thing. My go-to answer would be no, but there could be a way, if I call it correctly.
Well,
That's actually an
It
interesting
would
question.
require you to actually go to Dronas, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. So short answer, no. Long answer, there's a way that's buried in the lore for you to go from human to drone, or any race to drone, really. Except, well, that'd be up to semantic argument. But yeah, so technically, yes, it's possible, but not through just straight limb replacement.
And I don't think Florvana would do it.
yep.
No.
Yes,
And-
and Florvana, that's not a thing.
Yep, and I mean, when it does come down to it, if your GM wants to make that an easy transition for you, they certainly can. GM is God.
Well,
GM,
I mean,
yep.
that's something for us to think about.
It's definitely.
Certainly.
You got your answer, Conrad, or should we move to the next question?
Yeah, you can go for the. No, I don't have anything yet.
Okay. Joseph Thompson asks, Rekindled seem to be artistically depicted in two different ways. Ghost-like figures in the race description with a more solid Frankenstein-like race in the example characters. Why?
The best way to answer that question is that the Rekindled are kind of
Amorphous?
yeah, they are, and they're unique to each individual. So when a person dies or is on their is going through death, if there's something in the world or in their life that is keeping them that they're fixating upon in their last moments, if they have enough pure will to return or see or come back to whatever that element is that they're fixating on, they can for lack of a better word, respawn as yeah as rekindled, and along with that comes aspects of their personality and their race and their experiences that they're carrying over, and that manifests itself physically. So if you had someone who was, in, let's say, the Pulse military, who had a very long career and was, assassinated or something like that, if they came back as a Rekindled, they may come back as one of the, as you put it, the more solid Frankenstein-like creatures, whereas a person who, say, was an artist their whole life and died tragically in an accident when he stepped off the street corner or something like that, might come back looking completely different because of the way that they lived their lives prior to their death.
Anybody else?
I think he covered it pretty well.
Okay. Next question is Christopher Smith. He's asking about a updated high-res map of Fenris.
We actually have one.
That's in the works. We have one, but we still want to add in more
It's not ready.
smaller areas. It's not ready because, well, the major cities aren't moving in their location, the major locations. We've been working on adding in, little towns and villages throughout the world, and we want to be able to have a way to document that. So the map is not ready yet, but yes, we do have one, and it's quite shiny.
I can put up the one that I have without that doesn't have any labels or anything on it.
Yeah, you could do that.
To give you guys an idea.
All right.
Go
Next
dig it up
question
here.
is from Mythic Affinity. Any new monsters available that you haven't mentioned before?
Yes.
Yes.
Ton.
We only released the backer monsters and the ones that were, related to the playtest we sent out in with the playtest, and there's a hell of a lot more. How many monsters do we have left?
It's like 75 or
Let's
something like that.
see. Countdown, round up, plus or minus, yeah, something like that. And that was cut down from what, 150, 200 monsters. We had enough for a book, kind of, sort. Yes.
But it's still a lot of work to finish those monsters. They were basically like all ideas. We had to finish fleshing out the rest of our monsters because a lot of them were, someone had an idea to make some kick-ass monster, so we jotted it down, put it in the official docs, and didn't give it stats, didn't give it attacks. We just had a 1 or 2 line description and maybe some lame-looking attack. And
Cough,
we had to
house cat, cough.
Nah, House Cat's badass. It was actually well flashed out, had attacks, damn it.
Yeah, I know.
Just because you gave it attacks doesn't make it a monster.
To clarify, the House Cat I made when we were doing this whole monster a week thing we did for a while. Came up with a monster called the House Cat as a joke, so out of ideas. And I managed to sneak it through all the way up to about, a month and a half ago?
Like 2 months, yeah.
Yeah, about 2 months ago. It was in there for almost like a year. Just
Every
chilling,
time
House Cat.
we removed it, you just slip it right back.
No, we didn't remove it.
No,
That's the
no,
thing.
it was never removed. See, what happened was
We just ignored it.
Yeah.
that I was like, okay, it's time to compile all of the monsters together. I compiled all of the monsters together, and I put the house cat in there, and it was safe and fine and everything like that. And we just left it. We kept looking at it and be like, yeah, we'll get it to another day. Kept just putting it off.
Yeah.
Eventually, when it
finally
came time
scrapped it.
to, hey, we actually need to do monsters, it was like, bye, house cat. We put you in a box, and we discover if you're Schrodinger or not.
Yep.
Well, come to find out, it died.
Next question is from Rhoda Fury. Do you guys plan to run another game or have someone else in the community do so and edit to YouTube or stream it or such?
The answer is yes.
We'd love to. We'd love to have... There's some plans in the works, but I know we'd love to have y'all run a game and record it and either live stream it. We can put the recording up later for y'all on our YouTube or link to it or whatnot. I know personally I'd love to see people do more live streams of the game, basically.
The biggest problem with us right now is the only synchronized free time we have is bookwork. Is working on Shattered. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to find a time frame when everybody is available to run a game that's not already taken up.
Yeah, we spend twice a week working on Shattered, and that typically is our free time for the week, in a sense. But if someone wants to run a game, shoot us an email or talk to us in Discord, which we'll drop the link to Discord in the chat here before the end. Actually, I'll do it now after I finish answering this question. And just let us know so we can, table you on the events for us to show up, someone else to show up for a little while, or, be there to answer questions if there's some rule clarifications. Things like that. All right, next question is...
Marshals.
Yeah, because someone explained Verta Fury, someone explained Marshals, a little bit of it to us, for those who may be watching as well. Yes.
If nobody wants it, I'll take it.
It's all yours if you want it. I know you and
So-
Tex rebuilt them a while back, so
Yeah, we
Yeah.
put a lot of man hours into that. So marshals are interesting. They they're kind of like clerics from D&D in the sense that they draw on mystical powers, not quite the same form of magic as your primal thurgis and your necromancers. Um, Basically, they're typically chosen, sometimes against their will, sometimes willingly, to essentially represent an element or concept or an idea. And these tend to be very fluid, very non-absolute. So you have your typical elements: air, earth, fire, water, but we also have some less physical ones like love, hate, war, and peace. And when you're bestowed with basically being representative of this element, you're given an omen, and it essentially marks your character. And these come in a variety of forms, but they're pretty similar throughout each element. So, like, what was it? For air marshals, they grow small, almost magical wings. Darkness, their eyes become pure black and almost seem to like radiate a darkness. And so a marshal is, you know, if someone is a marshal. There's no hiding it usually. Actually, that's one of the things about the omens is they can't be hidden. The wings of an air marshal will sprout through their clothes. Those eyes can't be masked, can't be hidden, even behind glasses or sunglasses. It still kind of emanate that aura. Um, so there's no hiding who you are or what you are. And when they're bestowed with this uh, condition, I guess, when they become a marshal, they gain access to miracles that allow them to affect the flow of battle, to help others or hinder others. Um, some of that as simple as healing someone or reducing fatigue or fear, to shielding your friends' minds or dealing additional damage. So again, very like or paladins, clerics from the D&D casts. Um, One interesting element of the marshals is the fact that they all have an opposite. So air and earth, fire and water. And when in each other's presence, they have this ability to essentially debilitate one another. It's basically their two elements coming into clash. And it's not always present. It's not always something. They have to will it into action. But when it does, it can lead to some really interesting encounters. Like when an air marshal and earth marshal come into conflict. If they decide to oppose each other through will, an air marshal suddenly can't fly, and they move much slower, like they're being weighed down by the Earth's gravity, or the planet's gravity, I should say. Whereas the earth marshal can no longer use their tremor sense, can no longer feel things through the ground, and they also start moving slowly as if the air itself is thickened and is fighting against them. And so you just have all these raw powers at odds, and it's really cool. But from a cultural standpoint, martials are interesting in that they don't really have a clear-cut place. In some places, they become like priests. They start preaching. They start encouraging others to worship and pray to these powers, to these elements, which don't really have a deity necessarily, but are just these raw elements. Others take up the task of being like knight errants, going around helping the poor, helping those in need, fighting for justice. Um, and others still, take up crusades. They go out, they fight monsters. They go out and they fight others of their opposing element. So really, what a martial is in society is entirely up to them. But when it comes to matters of that element, they tend to be the authority. If someone has a question about how to worship, if someone has a question about how to become a marshal, if they want guidance, they'll go to a marshal if they can.
All right. Next question is: Aren't drones get from Joseph Thompson? Aren't drones inherently given racial traits based on being a machine from birth? There's affinity for machines. Yes, every race is given their own specific racial traits based on their race. They're also given racial talents they can purchase later. Zip?
Well, and to more clearly answer that, possibly, they have, even though they have their roots in humanity, so much time has passed that a new drone, I won't necessarily call them a newborn, but a new drone coming into existence is, modified in so many ways you can't even tell that they were human. So yeah, they do have affinity for machines, like you put, and all their racial traits are kind of based around that fact that they are mechanical beings from birth, or from their beginning of their existence.
Courtney King asks, not sure if this has been asked already, but are there drugs in Fenris? Short answer, yes. Long answer, not in this book.
Well,
Sort of. There's potion. And
well, there is that. We do have an alchemy system in play that certainly could create certain things that you could use as drugs and things like that. But we also do have mention of alcohol and some of the more conventional things we don't call drugs, but they are. And we always did have an intent to. I always had an intent to write up a whole drug and addiction system. It's just not something I ever got around to.
All right. Next question is from Tom Chartle. He asks, what kind of fan community support we have going forward? Well, we hope to. We have forums, we have Discord, we have a Twitter, we have Facebook. We try to keep it as much as we can. The best way to get in contact with us is, generally speaking, Discord, actually, because there's at least one of us on pretty much all normal U.S. hours of the day. We hope to obviously get more people and, invest in the game, have active forums, active Discord, and that kind of bleeds into the previous question I had a while ago about fan-made content, and we want to definitely have fan-made content.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, I have Discord on my phone and on every computer that I have, so if, someone asks a question, I'm usually around most of the time. Everyone else, as Tech said, is around, excuse me, during normal U.S. hours. Some of us are around during abnormal U.S. hours, so you may be in luck.
I mean, what?
Yeah, you may be in luck. Yep.
Next question, Christopher Smith says, heard about Conrad's Marshal of Love. What's your favorite character you've all played in Shattered Games? Conrad, feel free to continue to expound.
He liked that character.
Dude, that character was awesome. Character made my day. But as for characters I've played, my favorite was playing a vampire martial artist. Some of the mechanics that made him fun have changed slightly since then, but essentially what made him so much fun was that he was essentially able to tank, even though he was a grappling martial artist. Essentially, he'd go into the fight and just bull rush the first person he could and grapple them. And the thing about vampires is they get small amounts of health when they grapple by feeding. So every time I was able to successfully, tackle an opponent and take control of the grappling encounter, I was able to feed on him. So, I'd take one guy out, essentially out of the fight, and I beat him to a bloody pulp and keep myself fed. So even if other people were trying to, attack me and injure me while I was in the fight, I was able to reduce most of that effect, and then tackle another guy and take him out of the fight and grapple him until, he was unconscious or what have you.
I know for me, thinking about it, I have never been a player in our games. I've always been the GM. Even from the first time when there was the transmuter. That was probably my one and only character, but he was essentially a human, and I'm trying
I remember that
find
character.
him. Something Dard.
Mako.
I can't even remember. Yes, Mako Dard. Yeah, he was essentially a high up officer in the Pulse military, but the Pulse military heads and everything, they hated him, and essentially he was he was the lead member of a essentially suicide squad. They'd always send him out on the most ridiculous missions, and he would always come back and successfully complete the mission, thus perpetuating the anger that the higher ups felt for him, always giving him more and more dangerous missions. And he was back when we had different rules. He was able to combine his magic with his weapons and stuff like that, but since it's changed, it's more of he does a magic attack and then he did a physical attack, and it was pretty awesome. Always leading the suicide squads.
I think my favorite character is actually in the same game that Conrad's Vampire Grappler was. I had a wretched martial artist that I got lucky on a mutation roll and got the claws. I forget what tier they were off the top of my head, but so I basically had Wolverine, I guess. And when
Yeah.
while Conrad would go around grappling things, I'd run around just like tearing into things with my claws, and it was we were both the frontline guys in the fights all the time, and it was a blast.
For the most part, I wound up just GMing our playtest with Shattered, but I do remember one character that was actually pretty awesome. It was a drone that I had attached a flamethrower to an arm. It was totally unnecessary. I could have just had the flamethrower, but it was just so much more awesome to have it on. It's like, what's the point of having flamethrowers if you can't have flamethrower arms?
Oh God. So, chat. They reminded me my glorious character who was a psychic and I believe like ranged, and that was a lot of fun, definitely back then. And like the one anecdote is that I totally was trying to convince someone to help the party, and somehow thought that was a good idea to stab the NPC's mother, who we were trying to convince, on accident. I mean, who burst into a room at like 1 a.m? I just attacked. Kinda was the poor choice.
Instincts.
Yeah, but
Suppressing fire. I mean, suppressing psychic.
it was accurate suppressing fire.
And a little bit PTSD.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
You don't sneak up on a guy with PTSD. As you're stabbing her repeatedly.
yeah. So anyway, that kind of derailed kind of most of the GM's plan for that night. But I would definitely say I'm looking forward to playing around with some of the necromancy work we've been doing. I know we have a nice, much more fluid system for zips. The Stitches remake that we've worked on and are polishing up now. And I definitely want to look into crossing that into either some more like psi things, so floating stitches, or like catapulting a stitch with my mind. These are things that I dream about when I'm having good dreams. And then you know what? I want it to be on fire, so I'll take some primal 30 to have a flaming stitch catapult Mindapult. Yes. This is what I look forward to.
Well, for me, my favorite character was a vampire. I liked doing ballistics. I had pistols, actually revolvers, and I really liked that point in time, and currently too, how our ballistic systems works because it's just nice and simple, but still robust enough to have decent like trick shots, things like that. I really loved the versatility of being able to do ranged and then having like being a martial or doing martial arts along with range. So someone gets close enough, you grapple them. Otherwise, you stay at range and just pot shots. All right. Our next question is from Mythic Affinity. Do you show how to modify monster levels and damage output in the GM part of the book? Yes. We have the entire monster system explains how to modify, adjust levels based on, or session numbers, I should say, not really levels, based on where your players currently are.
So with that, if we've kind of got two methods for how the mastermind is built. We've got the XP one, which is built along with the character's progression, and that allows you to build a mastermind with stats, with talents, with everything. And then I kind of developed a streamlined version of that, and it's a point buy system for stats. So every session you'll get 1 point just to put into stats for your mastermind, and it flows along at the same rate that you would build a mastermind with XP, and it makes it so you can, as a GM, you can dole out monsters quicker and not have to do so much back work, as it were. And if you want to be quicker about it or just want to use our monsters or what have you, and it still gives you the growth of a mastermind if you want to keep that route as well. So it's really easy to plug in your own numbers into all of our pre-gen monsters. If you're like, nah, I want him to fight this session 21 to 25 monster at session 2 or stuff like that, or you want to be able to continue growing the first session monsters to keep pace with the players.
Yep, it's the secondary method is really just if you're not, as a GM, if you're not interested in building a mastermind, you just want to get your monsters done quickly. You have the point buy system to do that with relative ease.
All right. Our next question is from another goblin. It's hi, Dennis here from Sweden. Big fan. My favorite playable race is Forvana. Apart from facing the same challenges like any other races, what challenges are unique to Forvana characters? Well, Forvana are an exceptionally young race. So, oftentimes, at least fluff-wise, you can expect other people in more remote areas not to know what the hell you are. Because you're looking at, about 50 years, I think, at the current time, or is it longer than that now?
I think 50 is about right.
Yeah,
about
it's
50
about
years
that.
or so before current day. So, if you go out far enough into, the podunk area of the world, they're not going to know what a Forvana is or why you're a massive fungus moving around talking to them.
Yeah.
Yep.
That'd be probably the biggest one. And all races will have some sort of racial slang. For example, all of the races' names are actually from the humans' point of view. The humans named pretty much every single race. So the names given to each of the races, other races, are pretty much kind of racist within themselves.
They're kind of considered derogatory.
Yeah, derogatory, that's the word.
Yep.
And we actually took their descriptions are actually more or less from the point of view of humans. And in a lot of them, we wanted to keep that kind of feel that humans are quote-unquote the superior race.
Well, or at least they see themselves as such.
Floravana,
Yeah.
also, aside from their obvious fire bad thing. Uh, they really don't have a lot of
Much articulate.
yeah. They don't really have a lot of culture themselves because they're a new race.
Exactly.
They don't have a lot of history behind them.
Hmm. Well, and to that end, I'll say that probably even more so than getting out to certain areas of the world where people don't know what you are. The Florvana's tendency to want to help and heal and restore is going to make them find themselves at odds with much of how the world works. So, where you have the wretched who, might makes right, the strongest person is the one who's in charge, and, if I gotta kill you to take leadership, then that's what I'm gonna do. That kind of worldview is something that the Florvana are gonna struggle with greatly. And that applies elsewhere, too.
All right. Next question is from Courtney King. Do you guys have any plans to have a booth at a con anytime soonish?
I would love to.
I wish. I would love to, but probably not until next year at the earliest.
It's been kind of a sour note for me when I've been thinking about it because, we had a lot of you guys ask us last year if we were going to be making it to any cons, and, as our answer probably was, like, we'd love to, but, we don't know yet. And we had talked about trying to make it to some, and I even had all the past couple of weeks showing up on my calendar on my phone was showing that I had put a reminder in that.
Me too.
There's a con coming up, or
Gen Con.
That Gen Con was coming, and so I've been staring at it for a week and a half, being like, "Yeah, we're not going to Gen Con this year," and getting really frustrated about it because I'd love to go.
Yeah.
But that's unfortunately a money thing, and none of us live anywhere near where Gen Con is, or most of the other large cons.
I'm actually going to be, speaking of that, I'm going to be near San Japan, which is a San Antonio convention. I won't actually be at it, but I'll be in San Antonio during it. So
I won't be at a convention, but I'll be near it.
I know, right?
That's salt in the wound right
I
there.
know, right?
It's like there's water over there, but you can't drink it.
Yeah, I know.
So long and short, we'd love to, and we certainly have every intention to do so. But we gotta deal with the logistics of doing that.
Yeah, I mean,
Stupid
you got
logistic.
between, I think also like half of us are in courses of some sort now. Also, that kind of throws a huge wrench.
Dealing with college classes, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because I definitely would love to try and sneak into KublaCon next year again, as I missed it this year due to moving. But being on the quarter system, I just found out that I actually probably won't be able to attend.
You wanted to move, so it's all your fault.
Hey, you know what?
It's
nice.
Yeah.
Being the young one is the best fun.
Well, I'm in college too,
yeah.
So I'm with you.
Yeah. So
well, I'm back to college, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back to college as well.
So Mythic Affinity asks, with creation for NPCs or special loot, do you have random roll table or to streamline the process?
I don't believe so.
We do not have a random roll table.
Currently.
But that you mentioned it, I don't see why we couldn't.
I
come up
doubt it
with
will be as
something.
specific as, potion of X or, sword of whatever.
Yeah, like if we do implement a table, because it's been floated around, but the big problem is how specific are we going to get?
Especially our creation system for weapons is so
Unique.
robust and unique.
Same with
That's-
potion.
Yeah, potions as well. It might just end up being we recommend you give the players, money or a potion, a positive potion, or even a poison or something, not so specific.
Or we could say one would be, well, like the easy way is to say, look at what the session notes they should earn is, give them equipment that has a resale value of that. 'Cause that's a pretty easy way for you to go in and just quickly build a couple things on your own, but that's not streamlining the process as you're kind of referring to. And we could try and implement it, but it's definitely not going to be finished. It will always need some GM tweak or adjustment, because like Lost was saying, we can't do like a potion of this is this roll result, a potion of this is a different roll result.
I mean,
Because
probably
we have
the-
it,
oh.
yeah, we have so many open options in the creation of items that the table would be like 10,000 different possibilities for weapons. Okay,
I mean,
now you
Potion
have
probably-
alone
potions.
is probably 100 or at least combinations.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that-
probably the most down and dirty table would just be like, okay, roll to see what thing it is, then roll to see how many traits it has, if any, and then GM
based
just
off
build
of,
it
like,
from
session,
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that probably be the most down and dirty version of it. But a table right now, no. Table in the future, maybe. But you got me thinking, so curse you, Mythic Affinity!
Yeah, right.
And also thank you.
Yeah.
But curse you. But thank you. But curse you.
Brute force. Yay.
Let's see. I think that's all the questions currently, unless y'all have some other ones for us.
We caught up.
We caught up. We can start talking about. We did promise, we're talking about airships and something else. Let me go double check. We also promised to talk about if we ran out of questions.
You broke up there.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at. If the time allows, we'll talk about airship creation system and combat system. So if there's no more questions, we could briefly mention how people build airships and whatnot.
Build some airships. Sure. All right. Let's give me just a second, and I will gather some thoughts, and I will talk about airships.
Airships. Who are they and what do they do?
Well,
Yeah.
airships are. Airships came about as a way of devising safe travel. From a social, financial, economic standpoint, airships are groundbreaking. They revolutionary. They changed everything for Fenris. Prior to airships, you either rested on the ground, with your caravan and a few other people going wherever you were going. Hot air balloons were tried at one point, dirigibles were tried, but that didn't really solve the problem. Airships really came into play after the development of a device we call the Arcanic Drive. Essentially what it does is this large Arcanic device, which is a combination of Arcana, our magic, and mechanics. And so it's Arcanic. And it essentially allows for gravitational manipulation. And so it allows these airships up to a certain size to take off from the ground without any real extra propulsion. And so they have propulsion, but that tends to be for lateral movement, forward and backward, turning, and so forth. The Arcanic Drive was devised by someone who didn't actually come out and name himself. He kind of just developed this thing and put it out there for people to use, and changed everything. And so
It was open
over time,
source.
pretty much, yeah. And so he put this out there, and Lannis, Pulse, eventually Lokran, and even Neroth started devising their own airships for military and then for economic purposes. And so I mean, airships have really changed everything, and while they tend to be ubiquitous in these larger city-states, in Pulse, Lannis, Logran, Neroth, so people know what they are, people have seen them, the average Fenarian doesn't get a chance to interact with them because they're so expensive, essentially. They take a lot of man hours, they take a lot of knowledge and know-how to, build. And so typically, the easiest way for players in a campaign to get their hands on an airship is going to be through essentially a salvage or scrap auction, where they'll get a beat up airship for them to kind of enhance over the period of their campaign. And we have a system, well, a small segment to explain how and what kind of airships they can get through a salvage. But airships themselves are divided into 5 size ratings or size categories. The smallest being Scout, and then Corvette, Frigate, Galleon, and Dreadnought. With Dreadnoughts being something that you pretty much only see in the military, and there being incredibly few of them. We don't have an exact number, but you can expect to never see more than a handful ever. So for most people, Scouts and Corvettes will meet their needs. They're small, they're fast, and they can usually haul just enough for people to get the job done. For larger trade operations, you might see more frigates and maybe a galleon, though there doesn't really seem to be a need for that much to move at one time. Let's see. For building them, there's a lot of real crunch. There's a lot of numbers you're going to have to work on, and it's a real time investment. I'm not going to lie, because it's essentially its own set of rules, its own set of systems you have to learn to build.
That's a whole other
they have
part of
a
the
bunch
game.
of Yes, there's a bunch of factors that you have to take into account. Every airship size has a certain number of sections, so a scout is just one section. And what sections do is they determine essentially which portions of the ship contain the various components. Components will be essentially everything. It'll be your gun batteries, it'll be your engines, your crew quarters, all of those rooms, all of those pieces that you add onto it are components. And all components are put within a section. And so the section functions as a way for us to determine which part of the ship you can target, as well as where you can place these components. So there's a lot of strategic as well as functional capacity within a section. And then for health of an airship, it's tracked by section. So a section's health has a base health, which increases depending on how many components you have in it. And every section will have to have at least one component. Every section has to be used, essentially, but you don't have to use them in a balanced manner. And this allows aesthetically for you to create those ships that have those really crazy formations. Like instead of being perfectly symmetrical, they can be very asymmetrical, very one-sided. I think of some of the ships in Star Wars when I say that. There's a lot of asymmetrical craft that they have on this smaller scale, like scout scale essentially, where you have like everything sticking out to the left of the ship.
Like the B-Wing.
Right, that's a great example of the B-Wing. And you have all that out to one side, and then you just kind of have the cockpit over here. You can do that in our system. You can put everything except for, say, your cockpit in one section, as long as you use all of your sections. So it allows for that kind of creativity within the actual crunch. To determine how much you can put in your ship, we have 2 limitations. We have hard points and mass. Hard points is essentially how much of the ship you're using up, and mass comes into play for how much your Arcanic Drive can lift. Essentially meaning you can't put more stuff on your ship than it can hold through hard points, and you can't put more stuff on your ship than your Arcanic Drive can lift. So every component that you put into these sections will have a certain number of hard points and a certain number of mass. And there's no hard point limit per section and no mass limit per section, but as a ship total. So again, you still have that freedom and creativity to put as much wherever you want, as long as you stay within your hardpoint and mass limits. After that, some of the primary things you need to know about your airship are your speed, armor, and armor. So armor is unique, and that we decided to go with having 3 sections. So you'll have an upper section of armor, a middle section, and a lower section. And these come into play depending upon the angle at which you're attacked from. So if your enemy is on an even altitude with you, they'll be striking your middle armor. Whereas if they're above you, they'll strike your upper, and if they're below you, they'll strike your lower armor. So this adds a strategic element to the combat in that you now have to take into account height as well as positioning. So, as Cody likes to call it, 2.5D combat. Lost my train of thought. Yes, armor. So you have to upgrade each of these 3 sections independently, which adds to the strategic play in deciding where you want to be in combat. How high, how low do you want to be? Do you want to risk them striking your weaker armor and to get better hits on them, on their weaker armor, or do you want to play it safe and only expose your strongest armor? The limitation there with armor is that it requires a lot of mass to improve over time. But armor for airships functions as straight damage reduction, just like it does in player combat, so it should be very familiar to you. Then your ship's speed. Speed is a direct translation from the number of engines your ship has. So essentially all of these components, they, for the most part, adjust for size depending on which size category the ship is on. So you can assume that engines on a Scout are smaller than engines on a Dreadnought. So each engine will give your aircraft, your airship, 1 point of speed. Speed is essentially your maneuverability during rounds of combat. So if I have 5 engines on a Scout, I can move 5 squares per turn, or I can use any one of those points to turn, I believe it was 45 degrees. So it'd take up to 2 points to make a 90-degree turn. So that is kind of how you maneuver through the air during the airship combat. Your ships can also move in reverse, but at half speed. So there's that strategic element. You can't move laterally, side to side. You have to turn like a normal aircraft we're accustomed to. Moving on from airship, armor and speed. Getting into the design. I won't go deeply into the numbers, but there's a lot to take in when it comes to actually building an airship. You start with your organic drive. The drives are different sizes for each type of airship. So dreadnoughts have a large organic drive so that they can support the greater mass, whereas scouts have much, much smaller. After that, you'll determine how many engines, as well as the propulsion type, what gets you the energy to keep those engines running. And we have a variety of options, anything from bioreactor slaves. For those of you who aren't aware, we have a bioreactor mutation, which allows you to essentially generate energy and allows individuals with this mutation to interface with things such as airships to power them. So in the world of Fenris, this tends to be a commodity in very high demand, especially among wretched.
Cheap.
Yes, because it is cheap. It's the pinnacle of slave labor, essentially, because all you have to do is hook them up and make sure they don't go anywhere, and that's it. You have this source of power until the bioreactor mutant dies. So bioreactors are a source of power that are highly sought after in all areas of society. You have your standard combustion engines, man-powered slave labor, sails, steam propulsion. All those are options for propulsion, but they all come with some drawbacks occasionally. Like, for instance, sails obviously are dependent upon wind power, which can vary. And all of these come with a resupply cost. Essentially, after every voyage, you'll have to essentially resupply. So pay for the food, say, of your laborers, or for the fuel, or for replacements for your sails. All those things come into account when resupplying it. Then we have the weapon systems. So we tried to, again, keep with that free design concept that we have everywhere else. And so here what we did is we created, we call them gun batteries. So gun battery essentially is one weapon that does a set amount of damage, and you can enhance that damage with upgrades, as well as apply special effects to that battery. Some examples would be turning it into a harpoon battery or a flak battery. Harpoons will allow you to, attach to another ship and draw them in so that you can then board that ship and perform boarding actions and take over the ship or get out of the sky if you want to. After that, we have sigils. Sigils are our answer to, well, we're on an airship. What are the Arcanists and Psychics going to do? Arcanists and Psychics are able to use sigils, and only Arcanists and Psychics can use these. And it enhances their power, allowing them to cast spells and manipulate things with their mind at a much greater range with much greater effect. The downside to this being that a sigil must be attached essentially to an arcanic drive, and has to do with how arcanic energy is generated from the drive that gives this amplification effect. Sigils allow them to do a lot of things. Primal Theurgists essentially have the weather at their whim. They can create large storms, and they can directly affect and impact the enemy ship. But one of the most interesting abilities for them when it comes to airship combat is the ability to perform a sonic wave, which allows them to scan the enemy ships and then find out where certain components are within that ship, so that they can then feed that information to the gunnery master, and he can tell his crew what to shoot at, and they can target specific components that they want to for that more strategic depth. Necromancers are able to, what I thought was really cool is that they're able to reach out now with this amplified power from the sigil and reach into an enemy ship, and after people have died, cast, essentially, revive the undead on an enemy ship, and then use that undead almost like a boarding party to begin attacking the crew and draw their attention away from the airship combat that's going on outside and force them to fight within. Or if they want, if their ship has been taking significant losses, they can even resurrect undead within their own ship to continue, manning the guns and repairing things. And there are certain effects that come with this, because obviously working next to an undead is kind of a creepy thing, but it's possible. And then you have the psychics. The psychics have a number of things they can do, but I'm drawing a blank, so if you'll give me just a second, I'll dig right into it.
Of course, that's where he draws a blank.
Right?
Yeah. While you're looking for that, Mystic Infinity asks, Square's returns, is their combat grid-based? All combat in Shattered is technically grid-based. You don't have to have miniatures in a grid, but you may want to. You can always go as I put in chat here, you have the more RP-heavy, rules light version in Pathfinder or D&D. You kind of fudge the stride values. So let's say you're a little bit farther away, you can just say your GM says, well, you aren't close enough just yet. You need to move closer, or things like that. This is more the squares returns are more like for people who want to do the exact number crunching things. Whereas if you want to just have a house rule that you ignore strides and you ignore movement ranges, you kind of just do it based on feel as a GM. That's perfectly fine too.
Yeah. So
And
Mythic
also
Affinity. Yeah. I talk in squares because I always like to use battle maps when I play my games. So I always think in terms of squares as a measurement. So that was my bad. You are able to. We have exact measurements. I believe a square in airship combat is 25 or 50 yards. I think it's 25.
It's 25 yards.
Mhm.
And, with doing the distance using tape measures and stuff like that, just keep in mind you might want to have a protractor handy if you want to do that. because once you get past that 45, you actually lose some speed and stuff like that. But you know, however you want to do it, it's cool.
Yeah,
And
it's
follow our rules.
it's set up so that you can do it with the tape measure. But like Lith was saying, some angles you will probably need to start measuring. That might be a little bit clunky, but it's the only way to kind of balance that we don't have a giant aircraft carrier flipping around,
Mhm.
going full speed and then doing a hard left and going very fast.
And
I
it's
moved
like,
backwards. What?
and
Yeah.
while we do know that trigonometry is a squared plus b squared equals c squared,
Ooh,
Whoa,
for purposes we're
whoa.
doing. Oh, no,
That's a
let me
perfect
finish.
hypotenuse triangle.
Let me finish, guys. We're doing it the easier way to where all sides are equal. Otherwise, that takes a lot of math. So if you're 25 yards away, left and up, you're just 25 yards away because otherwise you get lots of math.
Oh yeah, no. Being the one that just finished
Mhm.
Calculus 2 college level, that equation when you get out of perfect squares.
Pain.
Oh dear God.
Yeah. So we're doing. We fudge a little bit on the ranges for squares, but
What?
well, if you go too far, eventually the
No,
approximation.
not you.
is-
I'm reading the chat. Someone wants your children.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Nope. Sorry.
They're already signed away.
No, they're already condemned to death. 'Cause I'm not having kids.
We'll see how long that
Aw.
lasts.
So,
Anyway, airships.
Derailed.
no, it's cool. It's good. Getting back into the sigilry, the psychics, the kineticists, they are able to impact the battle space rather literally. They're able to actually move airships, not usually large distances, but enough to make a difference, which can be really interesting once it comes to line of sight and firing arcs on the gun batteries. Whereas the illusionists are able to do some really interesting things as well. They're able to create mirages, essentially, fake armadas of airships
Like
to
pulling
mislead
rabbits
the
out of
enemy.
a hat. Wait,
What's that?
the illusionists are able to pull off great feats, like pulling rabbits out of their hats.
Or fake airships. But yeah, so it allows you to confuse and mislead the enemy, and potentially give you that upper hand, especially if they start firing at all these fake ships.
For the record, we can't
beyond-
officially answer the last question that was asked. Just saying.
I mean, it was technically answered, but
Beyond that, when it comes to components, the rest are we call them ancillary components. They're the extra things that you'll find typically on an airship. So a cargo bay, it holds stuff. You'll
that's
find
the technical term, by the way.
exactly, yes. That's the definition. You will find it in the book, page 9, airships. Crew quarters. We have a couple things for the morale side, such as the mess hall. We have a sick bay to help you kind of recuperate troops who may have potentially been injured or almost lost in the fighting. And we actually have hangars, and that may come as a surprise, but we actually have a class of, I don't want to call it an airship. We call them strike craft. They're smaller than a scout. They're one man, essentially think a fighter jet. And they have this thing that we call a microwell, which allows them to tether this smaller ship to the arcanic drive, almost kind of like a wireless frequency. It allows this ship to operate within a certain range of the airship to basically go out and harry other airships in squadrons, small squadrons. The smallest airship you'll find with a hangar is probably a frigate, but even then, that's debatable. It's more likely to find on, say, a galleon or a dreadnought. And so these small strike craft usually come in squadrons of 5 or 6, and they deal much less damage, by themselves. But they're a nice way for some of these larger ships to help take some of the pressure and deal more damage in combat. And they can be taken care of and repaired in one of our other components called the machine shop, which is used for repairing the ship, and if you have them, strike craft. And that takes us over to what exactly are the players' roles on the airships. So we have a few. In the officer cadre, which we presume would be made up entirely of players, or NPCs in the case of, say, an enemy airship. You have a few roles to fill. You have the captain, the chief engineer, the helmsman, the gunnery master, the master at arms, the sigil master, and the squadron ace. You don't have to fill all of these every time. Some ships may not, say, have a sigil, or they may not have a hangar bay, and those will therefore negate the need for a sigil master or a squadron ace. But all of these are available, and all of them have certain things that they can do to enhance the overall performance of the ship and its crew. And these can be further expanded through taking talents in each of those. So when you're active as a gunnery master, there's certain talents that you can take that are gunnery master specific that allow you to perform unique tactics or enhance the ones you already have. So the captain's role is to use his charisma stat and command skill to give orders if he doesn't have other officers to fill the role, as well as maintain the crew's morale. So pretty self-explanatory. But the easiest way to picture playing as a captain is to put yourself in the seat of Jean-Luc Picard. That is you. You are the captain. Your goal is to put out orders, keep your ship and your crew intact as best you can, and sink the other guy. So
You
a bit more
sank my
violent Jean-Luc
battleship.
Picard, but Jean-Luc Picard. The chief engineer, his primary goal is to make sure that the ship keeps running smoothly. He uses his intelligence stat and his mechanics skill to do that. He basically, his role is to make sure that the crew are in place to man the arcanic drive and to repair anything else around the ship or put out fires. So basically, he's more of a reactionary role, but he helps make sure that the ship, stays intact. And if you take some of his officer talents, you can actually enhance the performance of the ship in certain ways, or help survive some very deadly encounters, such as, say, your arcanic drive being damaged. So he's a very valuable member, though he may not sound like it from that brief description. The helmsman is pretty self-explanatory. He flies your ship. He uses his agility and the piloting skill to make sure you guys go where you need to go. He will have some combat interactions in the form of rolling to dodge. Now, admittedly, that gets much harder the larger your airship gets, but he can still try. Other than that, he has some interesting maneuvers he can perform and some bonuses he can get through the talents as well, like making sharper turns, boosting the speed of the ship for a brief period of time, things like that. The gunnery master is probably the most direct and obvious role when it comes to combat. He's in charge of giving the orders to the crew to fire their weapons. So he'll designate targets and he'll roll for both the attacks and the damage if he's on the ship. So this uses his perception perception stat and his ballistic skill for anything that he needs to roll for. Then you have the master at arms. It's probably my favorite officer just because his role is troop combat. Troops are any crew that have been assigned to a boarding action. So essentially man-to-man combat from airship to airship. And I'm really excited to see how boarding actions play out as people get their hands on this. Because it's really gritty and it's just quick and visceral, and it's either win or lose, and it all hashes out really quick. So the Master at Arms kind of like the captain, uses his charisma and command, again, to kind of lead his troops, however many he may have, into battle, and hopefully either defend his airship or take over the opponent's. Then we have the Sigil Masters. Sigil Masters can benefit from the Sigil Master talents to enhance some of their latent arcanist or psychic abilities to, further affect and control the battle space in the air. I've already given the examples before, using the storms, using kinesis to move other ships, things like that. And then lastly, the last officer is the Squadron Ace. He again uses agility and piloting, and his goal is essentially to give orders to any strike craft squadrons you may have, and handle any roles that they may need for attack, dodge, and damage. Do we have any questions now that I've done some more talking?
Hex asks, on a more serious note, can the airship provide a long-distance fire support for other combat or my way off base?
Yeah, that is totally possible. Their weapons have range increments, so you'll be taking penalties depending on how far away you fire from, but you definitely could do that. We have not gotten down an exact way of how to do that. Mostly right now we've just been working on making sure the airships work before trying to fully integrate with other forms of combat. So I can't give you a definite answer on how exactly that would work, but it's definitely within the realm of possibility.
One of the obstacles in that is airships generally have tons of very large weapons compared to something on the ground, which, okay, you have a handgun or even at the largest a tank. It's still no comparison to what an airship could have.
Yeah, we definitely have a way for the integration to work. So I wrote up a response of basically we do have long range cannons and the ability for you to engage per se in a ground combat. However, the issue is going to be in kind of the balance, because while on one hand it makes more sense that a galleon firing upon ground troops is going to wipe it out, we have to start playing a way for how do they counter it so that it's not just pulse ruffle stomping everything and everyone when they did their military expansion. There had to be a way for it to be not so dramatically one-sided. But like Conrad said, we're mostly working around getting airships fixed within their own realm, and integration will come later. And just being one of the numbers guys, I know I've definitely made sure that integration is possible. We just still haven't gotten down to the nitty-gritty of adjusting, but it's fully intended to have the 3-stage fight. You got ground troops, you got your tanks, you got your airships. We're slowly working away at what we can to get it all ready for you.
Rotofury asks, I may have missed it. Did you mention what crew positions directs the strike craft?
Yes, that is the Squadron Ace. Their entire role is flying with and actually giving orders to the other strike craft squadrons. So they'll handle all of those dice and all those commands. And again, if any of these officer roles aren't filled, it all defaults back to the captain. So he can make any of these roles. He just may not always perform as well as the other officers will, because they are specialized in these other fields.
There's actually going to be like talent trees.
Yes. I guess I can keep going. I mean, there's more to be had.
There's a hell of a lot in airships.
Yeah, there is.
I don't know if anyone has ever played the Kingmaker expansion to Pathfinder. I would definitely put this on that same kind of level.
Airships is intended to be both like a supplement to the game, in a sense of, oh hey, we can fire an airship for a bit and then go back to doing, hack and slash or role playing or whatnot. But it's also intended to be robust enough so that you could literally essentially never leave the airship. You have an entire campaign just as an airship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the exciting parts about having the airships fully fleshed out now, is that there's that opportunity to, if you really want to, you can devote your character almost entirely to airships and airship combat and an airship campaign, and it's absolutely exciting.
And as it mentioned,
You cut out there, Cody.
yay, testing 1 2.
There you go.
So, all right. As it was saying about the Kingmaker, and about an hour ago, I mentioned about future expansions. Personally, anyway, I definitely loved the Kingmaker and have been chipping away with weird little thoughts and ideas of how to create a Kingmaker within Shattered.
Huh.
And I've lost a lot of hair. I'm 22, balding now, but it's definitely on my plate of something I like, because I love RTS style. I love RPGs with RTS. It just
we do have there has been always thought back in our mind about a Kingmaker example in Neroth. Those who don't know Neroth, I don't think we've released much about Neroth. It's a city that is very fractioned by vampire covens. It's not really a consistent one there. And so an idea we had been bouncing around for a while is that we do a Kingmaker style game as a vampire coven in Neroth, or as a what are they called? Not the guild, but lodge, as a trader lodge in Neroth, trying to become, the head trader lodge or head coven in Neroth and ruling the city basically. So let's see. Next question is Road of Fury. I do love the idea of running an airship game or something. It sounds fun. Is there a group in the world more well known for their airships? Pulse.
Yeah, the three four main city-states, if you will, are probably best known for their navies. Pulse, especially, since they're the prime military power in the world. But they're all very different. You have, Pulse is very, they make very heavily armed and armored battleships, whereas Lannis, who has a bit less resources to work with, and also just has a generally different kind of culture than Pulse, has quicker, more agile ships that rely more on the use of arcana and magic to deal damage to other airships, as opposed to just straight up guns. And then you have Neroth, who, kind of sits somewhere in a healthy medium between the two. But their ship constructions are all very different. If you look on the video right now, the picture we have up is a picture of a Pulse airship, to kind of give you an idea. And previously we've had the other two airships shown as well.
For example, and then it said 4, we've only mentioned 3.
Sorry.
Lokran's a bit special. Lokran, due to holding their water source hostage after a war, essentially, have written up a treaty that demands that each of the 3 cities send them airships every year.
More or less.
So they have a combination of all 3.
Yep.
Can we talk about these 4 factions? Hell yes, we can.
Oh
One
boy.
of the reasons that they're so
Conrad's
prevalent
excited.
is their airships.
I am excited.
Yeah, he's a little too excited.
No.
Bring it down about like half a notch.
I'm so excited.
All right, Captain
Okay, that's a little
Buzzkill.
Yeah, seriously. Tell me not to be excited about Shattered. What's wrong with you? Does anyone want to take a city? We could do a person per city.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know what? Pulse is kind of the... I don't know if it was ever really intended to be this way, but it kind of wound up being like the central hub of the world and of our kind of discussions and campaigns we've written. Always start in Pulse and these sorts of things. But Pulse is a city run by its military. In fact, every member, every citizen rather, is a member of the military in some way, shape, or form. There is not a, if you have some sort of, disability or something like that, they will find something that you can do to help, run the war machine, for lack of a better word. But it, what else to say about the city itself? It's built inside this structure that, as far as anyone knows, was naturally occurring. A arcanic, like almost biomechanical ring that creates the outer wall of Pulse, and four central towers, spires in the interior, all of which are kind of like these living mechanical structures. Nobody knows exactly why they're there, how they got there, or how they function, but they keep expanding. The wall of Pulse slowly spreads outwards, crushing and consuming anything in its path. And we're talking like, feet per year.
The unstoppable force.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't pull up any of the docs because I'm logged into our shattered
Which one you need?
shattered Gmail account, so I can't actually reference any of the stuff that we've written for it. If you got
That's
Pulse,
alright.
you can send it to me.
Yeah.
I'll pull some stuff out of that doc there. Thank you, sir. All right. Beautiful. Thanks, Conrad.
No problem.
So Pulse, when it was founded, started as it wasn't so much a militaristic city as of yet, at least not on an official level. It was first ruled by by the original leaders that called themselves the Iron Ring, and they had several laws that they put forth, which they called mandates, which required certain things of the citizens of Pulse. Like for example, every Pulse citizen must be trained in an approved skill. So, masonry, carpentry, mechanics, smithing, any of these kind of trade skills were highly valued. Whereas, unfortunately, things like, being classically trained in art might not be as viewed as useful to the leaders of Pulse, the Iron Ring. So, and that's something that started at the city's founding, but has kind of remained to a degree since. City has since opened itself up to trade and things like that, so it's a lot more accepting of these other kinds of skills and trades and things like that that it wasn't before. But it's still very much focused on anything that can contribute to the common defense of the city. City is made up of several districts. The primary of which is called the Axis, and it's at the direct center of the city, nestled in between all of the spires of Pulse. It is the governmental center and the military center of the city. It also houses something called the Field of War, which is this. It's a dome-like structure that is constantly being altered by legion of psychics and primal thurgists and necromancers and illusionists to create different kinds of battlefields for the militaries to actively train in. So if they are preparing a campaign up north to, fight off a horde of undead in a tundra or something like that, they might change the state of the field of war to represent, or at least appear to represent, something like you might find in a tundra. Next on the list, surrounding the Axis, is something called the Flora Labs, and it is a massive hydroponics organization where all of the food for Pulse and all of its citizens is cultivated. It is also where, through the use of many of the plants that they find throughout the world, they use to also purify any water that they do have flowing throughout the city as well. And then nestled underneath the Flora Labs and the Axis is the Great Forge, and this is probably the most iconic portion of the city, even more so than the towers. Because if anywhere you go in the world, if you go to Lannis, if you go to Lokrin, if you go to Neroth, or any smaller cities, a lot of the armaments you find, or armor for that matter, will have been made in the Great Forge and Pulse. So it's kind of, I would dare to say it's almost like a world wonder. In a way, not to reference, civilization terms at all, but so yeah, that's where all this stuff comes from. Next, further out, surrounding all of this, is what's called Quarterlock, and that's where all of the citizens actually live. It's not very well laid out, despite the orderly nature of the city and its military and its citizens. Quarterlock is a mess of meandering walkways and pathways and dead ends and things like that, but where all the citizens live and go about most of their daily lives. Last but not least, outside the Wall of Pulse is where the slums exist. Slums, we call them downtrod, and that's where most commonly criminals, people who have been expelled from the city for whatever reason, or people that are just hoping to get a chance to enter the city and have a better life, will settle. The largest defining factor of Downtrod itself is the fact that there's more population in Downtrod than the actual city of Pulse itself. It is a massive sprawl of shanties and huts and mishmash of different kinds of architecture and things like that. I think it's a pretty good rundown of the city for the most part. Trying to keep it short, of course. Which is not.
That's the short version?
Yeah.
That's the short version, my friend. Let's not forget the crush.
Oh yeah, the crush is the border between is the border between Quarterlock and Downtrod, where the wall is. And as the wall expands, it reaches out and will eventually crush any homes that are nestled up next to it. So people are constantly moving out away from the wall as it expands and consumes their homes. Kind of sucks.
It's a wonderful life.
Yeah.
Good times. Does anyone want to take Lannis? Odds are resounding no.
I'll take Lannis. So, Lannis is probably the, I wouldn't say exact opposite, but pretty close to how Pulses run, is where it's not so much a military power, it is a type of democracy. And Lannis, they pride themselves on education and knowledge, and from the first time of its birth, the city has thrived on ensuring that the knowledge of the past and the knowledge of the future are preserved to the best of their abilities. They will oftentimes be seen just milling about, just reading books or trying their hands at new and unusual ways to use arcane and psychic abilities. So Lannis was founded by a few hundred men and women, and they've been now known, or they've been tongue-tied.
It's cool.
They have come to be called the Founders. They rallied together and established a plan to build a memorial to humanity. This is after the fall, or this is after Ragnarok and the Reckoning and everything. And they tried to maintain the knowledge of the past. And years and years and years pass, and they're still maintaining, and they keep building up, and they keep passing on their knowledge and writing new knowledge and all this other stuff. And they built up the city to be a shining memorial to humanity. Well, what the Founders didn't know is that they actually built a new society and helped to lay the foundation for a quote-unquote better tomorrow, if you can call anything in Shattered a better tomorrow. So they developed new ways in this new and foreign world to them to be able to build farms and maintain defenses against all the new and exciting environment that this world brings with it. And from the small start as a memorial, it became a sprawling city of the last bastion of knowledge. So there's a few different districts, but all of them fan out from a single point: the Great Library, where all of the world's known knowledge is stored, and maybe some other types of knowledge, but who knows? So you've got the Stone Scroll District. It is the smallest of all the districts, but it is the nerve center of Lannis. It's a completely contained section of the city within the grounds of the Great Library. It houses apartment complexes, meeting rooms, trade forums, and many other different amenities. The tradecraft guilds of the farmers and the bookkeepers and the arcana and kinesis and all those things, they maintain embassies within the Stone Scroll. And the Stone Scroll is considered neutral political ground. There's house records, there's populace register, which maintains populations and all the fun stuff that comes with democracy, with censuses and visitor centers and all this fun little stuff that's there. And the Stone Scroll is the nexus of it all for Lannis. So outside of that, there is the Threshar. It is
Threshacre.
whatever. It's tomato. Threshacre. It is essentially the vast farm fields for maintaining the foodstuff of the city. It has a bit of a history to it that has secured its place within Lannis, that has helped to solidify its place amongst the Stone Scroll. And a lot of what is continued to be passed down is how to cultivate the land to make sure that it has the best fertilized ground and all these fun and unique fruits and vegetables. And it's grown since its humble beginnings into vast plantations and with plenty of food to feed all of Lannis, and also, to get that lovely alcohol from the fermented starch and fruits that they have come to known for. So the next district is the Arcanus. They sometimes call it the Center Ring, being in between the Stone Scroll and the Threshar. It is the industrial and military center of the city. This is where all the military strategies for Lannis come to be devised and thought up.
Awesome.
I think you may have bored everybody in the audience to death.
Probably, I mean,
It's okay.
All right, I'll do Hell real fast. Hell is not really a city in a sense. It is kind of a destroyed necropolis. Best way to put it.
yay!
Hell is where the zombies come from. It's where all the undead comes from, essentially. The battles of the city. Now, originally it was not, but we had a large battle there, and after it, the god that was ruling over the city, essentially, was pretty much banished from the realm. He's become very weak when the city was destroyed. And he was actually holding the zombies in. Those people did not know that at the time. And after his death, the zombies, or death, I guess banishment in a sense, the zombies have roamed more freely and in larger numbers. Hell is ruled over by a Dreadlord, although the Dreadlord does not necessarily know that he is a Dreadlord, because he's been brainwashed by the evil god.
What?
But that's
I'm president?
more in detail. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Exactly. And there are people who live in Hell quite well. It's mainly anarchy, because, well, there's really no true ruler. No one really pays attention to anybody. It's small groups working together against other small groups. There's often slavery and drugs and whatnot there, because it's, well, kind of a bastion of evil.
Well,
in a sense.
it's
evil
hell.
of humanity.
It's hell. We'll
When
just
people
leave it at
use
that.
the phrase "the pits of hell," they're being very literal in Fenris.
Yes, there are undead that roam the earth, Road of Hearing. We actually have a calendar based off of the movements of said undead.
That was a fun day.
Yep,
Yep.
That was an adventure.
So, where's the undead going to be today? Ooh.
pretty much. So, Hell is... it changed the picture to Hell. Yeah, it's pretty fractured tectonically because of the destruction from the magic after the battle, what's called Battle of Death's Door. And after that, it just, well, went to hell.
Yeah, it's not a city in the same sense that we think of Pulse or Lannis.
Correct.
But it is the root of where all the, well, I won't say all the undead, but the large bulk of undead come from, in the form of what's called in the world the undead tide. That, makes its way around the continent before eventually finding its way back to Hell and being refreshed and starting all over again, which is, as Lith mentioned, that's how we came up with the calendar system, was based on the traveling route of the undead tide.
And yes, for sure, you will get the calendar in the book. It's included.
Yep.
As well as explanations, any holidays, things like that.
Hopefully.
Kind of like how there's a
it'll be-
calendar for harvest.
It'll be the, Necromancer and Stitch swimsuit edition.
Okay. That disturbed
It's
me.
amazing.
And then I started thinking about, okay, well, these different types of stitches, you could be like showcasing the different types of oh god. Too much in depth.
That's amazing.
I mean, if the undead are one thing, they're pretty regular, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Fairly.
They have
So-
their ups and downs.
Yes, it's
And
an
you
undead.
have-
It's an undead health spa. That's a good way to put it.
Yes, yes.
The unhealth
Health
spa.
spa. Wow.
So then there's Neroth, which is actually to the east of Hell. Hell's the very almost northern city in the game, or the continent currently. Neroth is to the east. It is primarily a logging city in a sense. It's one of the very few sources of good wood. There's lodges there that control the influx of
I'm
trade
sorry.
in and out.
I have to say this. It's the blue pill of Fenris. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So Neroth is controlled and run by the lodges, although whoever's in charge often seems to change due to the constant infighting between the lodges. Not to mention like I said previously, the vampire covens are very fractioned there too, and so there's no real true leadership of Neroth, although each lodge often tends to claim that they are the leader because they're egotistical.
Or whoever has the biggest stick.
Yes, the biggest stick at the time. People tend to live. Really rich people tend to live in trees. So they'll have they'll build their house in and around a tree, and they'll have magic to infuse the tree so it doesn't fall over and kill them all. They're very pompous, I guess, with their wealth as well. And actually, their airships are made out of wood.
Ballsy.
Yeah, with all the fire.
Yeah, magically imbued wood.
Neroth is Neroth is the source of any, or the majority of, I guess you could say, luxury airships, if that is such a thing in this world. The rich or powerful want to get some sort of fast ship to transport them between cities or business deals or what have you. They might get a wooden ship from Neroth, which would be, handmade and carved and, all of these elegant fineries added in and such. So that's kind of where they fall in the airship scheme. Well, and also, in addition to what Lost just mentioned in the comments, there's Neroth was kind of the home of some of our proposed or contemplated ideas of either a Kingmaker style kind of campaign or even a board game, perhaps. So it's Neroth is intentionally left chaotic and kind of undefined, so we or GMs can play with it.
Chaos by design.
Yep.
Does that make it order?
Maybe. So, yeah, pretty much. You'd call Neroth to get the ones with racing stripes. So the last major city is city of Locarin, and it's kind of nestled in between where Pulse and Lannis are down south and where Neroth is up north. And it evolved from a trade post that was built into the opening of a series of caverns in a mountain range between Neroth and the other two cities below. After a few hundred years of that outpost remaining as it was, discovery was made of a untouched aquifer of pure, untainted water beneath it, which was unheard of. Everyone else in the world drinks, water that might have some degree of arcanic radiation, or might have considerable amount of sulfur in it, or any number of
purified.
other impurities. But Locarin possessed pure water, which subsequently prompted a war over it because other nations wanted to take it for themselves. Go figure.
Those greedy bastards.
A war which ended with Locarin rigging explosives to all of the access points to the water. Explosives which still remain to this day to maintain peace and order. Everyone's allowed to come up and purchase some, but if they try and take it by force, they run the risk of someone pushing the big red button, and now nobody gets it. So
basically what we're saying is something Mexican standoff, a new city was created.
yeah. Pretty much.
Now,
And,
there's also Dronis.
well, and also because it sits between Neroth, which is a major, exporter of lumber,
Supplier.
and Pulse and Lannis, which use that lumber, but they also use it to make other goods and also produce their own goods. Locarin sits on a trade route between the two, and as such is probably the most noticeably wealthy city in Fenris. There's always caravans going through, bringing all kinds of new trade and new ideas. And if you have any knowledge of history in like the Silk Road, between China and Europe, there, all kinds of cities sprung up and found enormous wealth on that path between the two locations. So this is kind of the same sort of idea.
There's also Dronus, but at least from the perspective of everyone but drones, no one's ever actually seen the city. People tend to disappear when they get too close to it.
Yep, that's about all there is to say about that one.
Pretty much.
All they have is hearsay and what they think they know about it, which is probably false.
Anything else, folks? Any other questions, or should we talk about like Glass Forest, Dragon Keep, or something like that?
It's up to you. You decide.
We've already touched on the Glass Forest, though.
We have.
Yeah, I'd like to hear somebody with a question or see
You
if
mean
anybody wants anything specific.
See?
Yeah, otherwise it sounds like we might be winding down here.
Mm-hmm. Not
Perhaps a
too
little
bad.
bit
About
early.
3 hours or so.
Yeah.
Not bad at all.
Well, if there's no. Oh. All right. So Road of Fury asked. I was wondering a little bit about the Magic in the world. I've read the stuff, the playtest of it, but I was kind of wondering if there was any chance you guys could talk more about the aspects of it.
Sure. Magic.
Was there something
um,
specific you want to
well-
touch base on, or just a general all around?
Yeah, if you could clarify just exactly what sort of
I
explanation.
will start off with our magic system is kind of takes a good note from, say, if y'all have seen the anime Full Metal Alchemist, how they have all the designs are very geometric, and that's kind of how we designed our magic. Our magic is very geometric based. It's why I think people like the Fravana or drones can use magic. It's not because it's something inherent to them. It's something that can be learned and taught.
And is inherent to the world itself.
Yes, correct. Other than that, magic is, well, magic. There's obviously, we talk about the origin a bit more. Okay. There's illusion. I think illusion was moved to Psi.
Yes. So-
Magic is now primal theurgy and necromancy, whereas Psi is now kinesis and illusion.
Correct.
Y'all know a bit more about that than I do.
Well, I know I can at least talk.
You cut out again.
The cutting of cuttingness. Better.
Yep, you're back.
All right. So I know that I can talk a little bit about like why we moved illusion over into Psi, and to kind of relieve any worry that we're concerned that there's not really a lot of schools. Why is it split into this own kind of separate category? Why didn't we pull it into one? So a lot of the things was to set up for future expansions. So with illusion, in the way the current magic system works, we were having a lot of difficulty trying to get it to kind of fit right and have it still be, say, as viable of an option as, say, just doing a lot of damage. So when we moved it over, we started looking at a potential conversion into Psi, and found that it actually made it so there's a lot more that you could do with illusion without it being as, I guess, steppy in a sense, say, like getting too much bonus for one spell point. you can step it up and scale it much more easily in Psi, which allows us to create a way for us to expand on these schools later. So, I know we have ideas for, blood magic and alternative and, what was it called? Transmutation?
Yeah.
As well for, one more Arcana school, one more Psi school. And we are able now to easily introduce new schools because we just fit them into the current system, which is just set up to be recipient for their own schools. Which also, because I saw someone talking about lets GMs create their own continents. GMs, players, by all means, you can definitely sit down and work out your own schools of magic and come up with custom ones. We made it pretty easy to follow the recipe. I mean, we don't have a set up system that we tell you how, but you definitely can. And we feel we have some pretty good bases to bounce off of, and that's what we'll be doing when we introduce new schools. As far as creating their own spells.
So, I can take this over if you want, Cody.
All right.
So, when your character decides that they want to go into or start studying Arcana, the first thing they have to do is select which school they want to study. So it's either going to be Primal 30, which is casting a lot to its namesake, casting a lot of the primal elements like fire, ice, air, things like that. And very damage heavy. It's not as much of a utility school as it is just outputting things that blow up. To put it simply, necromancy, on the other hand, is the art of altering life. So necromancers can curse people, which is altering their temporarily altering their physical structure to make them less agile, or temporarily altering their muscle strength to reduce their actual strength or things like that, but also to be able to create life through the form of stitches. And very early on, we had decided, as opposed to having a classic necromancer that you'd look at in D&D, where they can just kind of summon like legions of undead all over the place, they instead create a sort of Frankenstein's monster, if you will. Gather together various parts from corpses and stitch them all together, ergo the name Stitches, and bring them to life. And they can serve a number of purposes, either being, frontline fighters, or damage tanks, or even possibly assist the necromancer with casting spells and other things like that. So, once you have selected your school, the rank in said school grants you access to spell power, and you use points in spell power to pick certain aspects of a spell. So if you're a Primal Theurgist, you can say, okay, I want to add an additional d6 of damage to my spell and also make it an area effect. So each of those has a cost of spell power associated with it, and then you can pick whatever you want as long as you have enough to match it, and then roll your difficulty, which is twice the spell power used on the spell itself. If successful, it goes off, and then you can blow somebody up or something like that. Same applies to necromancy. Curses work in a very similar fashion, where you can kind of build and tailor the curses to what you may need, relatively on the fly for the most part. Stitches are the one exception in the casting schools where it takes a little bit more forethought to build and create. It's not usually something you do on the fly, but you would still use spell power to enhance them once you've actually made it. So, I don't know if someone wants to cover explaining a little bit of how Psi works.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pick that back.
We lost you.
You gotta be kidding me.
You are having
gotcha.
troubles.
Oh my god. Well, hopefully I can not have a mic issue right now. But so getting into Psi, like I talked about earlier and Zip mentioned, was the split or the bringing over of illusion, so that it has two what's called disciplines within Psi. You know, kinesis, which is the old Psi, just everything from the old Psi is now kinesis, and then you have the illusion discipline. So working with Psi, it's different. Its difficulties are adjusted differently than how normal Arcana works. So with this, you have what are called strain checks, and it's a point by up, but instead of having to do, you have a spell power limit. Instead of that, you just build up what you want to attempt. So if you're trying to, confuse a target, and then as well as pick them up and throw them, that could be around a strain 12. So you just need to roll at 12. It doesn't matter what rank you have anywhere, you just make the roll. But if you fail, the unique, the counterbalance to it is that on failure, you gain a point of fatigue. Now, inherently, Psychers, being that they are very, mind over matter styles, they are a little more inherently resistant to the effects of fatigue for the purposes of, manifesting, casting, their kinesis or illusions. They're resistant there, so they can take some failures, but they will still have fatigue penalties applied to their dodging and any other rolls that they make. So it kind of has that power play, like, up and down, where you can maybe once or twice in a combat really try and go for that like high peak, low chance success, just because it might really help out if you pull it off. But if you sit there and you're just loose cannoning left and right, you're going to cripple yourself into basically you could be coup de grace by like a squirrel because you can't dodge.
That's a funny picture.
So
Damn squirrels.
You tried to mind control the squirrel and failed terribly.
It now turns on you and bites your nuts off.
Yeah. Oh, the pun. The double pun. So that's where like kind of the different play styles also comes into, as we went into kind of like how is the abilities being created, like what are their main stats. So like inside it's like willpower, so we based it off of like, all right, would be, that's where the fatigue comes in, your willpower fights and its penalties there. In Arcana, Zip, I think you didn't talk about if they fail, they can lose their ability to cast spells if they fail too many times, but it's a little bit more like meticulous in how you can kind of count when you're going to go down in Arcana, whereas in Psi you can really just, it's a little more loose, but it has some interesting rewards. And then another interesting note, I think, is just how we made sure they were separate. Like the schools and disciplines, each of them have very little, if any, overlap between them, which allows you to start getting into multi-school casting or cross talent, archetype integration that starts getting like, all right, I'll move him over here, confuse him, you'll nuke the area, and then, curse them as well. start getting that like cross-disciplinary like interactions that makes combat makes the talents that we have. You can use them in nations at the least.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
To answer Rhoda Fury's next question, is there a system in place like in World of Darkness where you can create a spell, you can make a sort of rote of it, and it is cheaper to do? There will be, but not at the moment, is the simple answer.
Insofar as how to make it cheaper is where, we have to figure out the way to allow players to create them, and how is that going to counterbalance the fact it's cheaper now to use it. As it stands, there's a pseudo route where there's no real benefit to it other than you will probably start getting through, going through the game, you'll start realizing, well, pretty often this is something I will cast. And you'll start kind of pre-making your spells to the side. Like I normally will do 3 damage points and a status effect. What's the DC on that? What's the damage? And kind of have your own like setup spell list that you've custom created and can swap out on your own. Same with Psi, and all of the casting archetypes. You'll probably be making your own rotes. As of right now, there's no like benefit. There's no like cheapening word. Wordsmith, help me.
There's
no
no
way to make it cheaper.
Yep.
Voices. So many voices.
Yep.
Right?
That said, though, we do have a planned magic school down the road that will bring that into play if we're able to get there. Expansion stuff.
What the heck was that?
That was me.
Oh.
I squealed.
Were you squeeing?
I squeed. Hey, that spell school was my baby.
Yeah.
And then that baby was aborted because it was too powerful.
Whoa. Holy crap, dude. Well, I guess it's never dark enough.
Oh, Conrad, the dark humor.
Yeah.
Oh, darkness.
I'm not gonna say it,
There
but
are some things that can't be unseen.
oh man, but yeah, no, I will definitely like on the character sheet have kind of places for like some pre-gen spells by players. Another thing is like the math on the fly isn't too isn't necessarily like that bulky. It's a little weird at start, but we don't give you a lot to work with to screw yourself up or get confused. But as you progress, those of you who have played with the playtest will know that as you start adding it in, that's when it gets as complicated as you want it to be. But it's definitely, we kind of ease you into most of the systems once you start getting out of like the bread and butter sword and board style. Yeah, as Tech said in the chat, you can definitely start recording your favorite like combinations that you like to use. And also, as a note, there's like no limit to pre-gen spells. You don't have to like memorize. That's not a thing. It's just free form, build as you go, as you wish, and see if you pass.
Yep.
Yeah. Sweet. I think we're caught back up again.
Yep.
Guys, you got any suggestions? Looks like Rhoda just left.
Stepped away for
Oh, go
a
ahead,
few
Donald.
minutes, yeah.
Yep.
Can you tell who's actually here?
Not really. Oh, I can't. Yep, no way I can tell. How about this? Any of you guys in the indie team who are watching the stream right now, close it.
Close it? But
You
Closed
heard me.
it.
You heard me.
Well,
that's
Gerb's done.
job's done. Yes, my lord.
what is it now?
It's 8. Alright, you can pull it back up.
Wait, how's it still 8?
Ah, I gotta figure out how to get back to it.
Tamp.
Yep, I knew Mythic was
General.
still here.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah. Mute. Wait a minute. That was the wrong.
You pushed the wrong button. We are all going to perish.
Alright. Hot mic.
Well, seeing as how you're the only one that actually responded, did you have any particular subject you like?
Well, one thing I'll bring up for Mythic and anyone else that's here watching still, the state of the book currently is, my best estimate is probably about 80% complete prior to like the final editing pass. Most of the book is
I'm in the
there.
airships and fluff.
Yeah, I still need to put the airships in and some of the fluff in. But the vast majority of the book is there. Once that's done, when we send it out to China for printing, we'll release the digital PDF ahead of the actual book release, so everyone can, start digging through the final copy while we're waiting for China to print everything. Nice.
Oh, we're over the store. Now I'm nervous.
You have our thanks.
And our pity for being.
So, yeah, that's about where the book is. I've only got a couple of like airships that were mentioned earlier that I've got to plug in, and all of the fluff in the front of the book. But once that's done, we'll have editing passes go through, and then we'll be, should be, for the most part, good to go.
Yeah, and and since I'm kind of doing the China,
You're
I can
doing
go ahead
China. Interesting.
yes, the whole thing, all of it. Hello, valued customers at Mythic Store. So regarding that, it's looking really good. We got one printer that we have talked to that has been rather consistent with their feedback and responsiveness. So we're going forward with them, and we do have a sample that is being produced, so we will be probably locking down a printer soon.
And once we get the sample
Now-
in, we'll share pictures and stuff so people can see what it'll probably look like.
No, we've got to keep them in suspense. Oh wait, no sales. Yes.
All right. Second printer right now is, for some reason, Google Translate is making it very difficult to get specifics. Not even gonna lie here. We're having a little bit of a conversational difficulty, but I'm glad we got. That's why I went for started with 5 and just kept weeding them down. We look like we're on time to get this printer. As long as the sample comes in good, we're going to be looking at getting pretty close to our current deadline. So just some good news from the Eastern Front.
The Eastern
I guess.
Front.
I get it, because
Yeah.
they're in China.
Yeah.
Even though it's faster for me to go west, but whatever. I'm American.
The West is the best.
East is east.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's update
Trying
on
to run slim on topics.
Yeah. Trying to think of anything else that's really really big.
We talked about the races, the cities. We talked pretty much. We didn't really talk about martial arts, did we?
Ooh, we did not.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
martial arts and stealth are the last systems. I mean, kind of our social talents as well. Kind of the last 3 sections we haven't really touched on very much.
Social's still a little
Yeah, I know.
incomplete.
Stealth and martial arts is what we have left. So martial arts is we try to make it very strict, but not.
Strict but not. You mean adhering to a style and discipline?
Yeah. So there's styles and disciplines. There's
Styles and impacts.
impacts. Sorry, styles and impacts. And you choose one of each, and you get if you upgrade, you choose a rank from what specified. So, for example, there's some that do better for dodging and weaving. Other things do more damage. There's one that does more damage if you do more damage, and it's been a while since I did martial arts. Give me a moment.
It's okay. I can pick it up from there.
Okay.
So the way it works is when you take the martial arts talent, you get to choose, like you said, a style and an impact. And so each of them kind of has a different. I'll just go into them. So styles, each of them kind of influences how you'll engage others in combat. So kind of like how we have, judo, aikido, Krav Maga, how each of those all have a unique focus when it comes to conflict. That's what our styles are. So we have one that's for reactions, counterattacking, that sort of thing. We have another for grappling. We have another for actually implementing magic into your strikes. And each of those, brings a new style to the way you fight. Impacts are a way of flavoring then how your style behaves. And each of these are typically focused on a certain part of combat. So there's one that'll increase your abilities to dodge. There's another that'll increase your damage when certain things happen. For example, brutality. After dealing damage, you can do a small amount of additional damage on your next attack. And this will reset each time it happens. So there's just a couple examples. And these rank up over time. So, for example, with Daohud, the grappling style, at rank 2 of this martial art, you can, as a reaction, instead of dodging or blocking, attempt to grapple your opponent. Essentially, basically, it's like someone throwing a punch and then you grabbing their arm and now taking control of the scenario. And these sorts of things progress to where you can perform these with more lethality or with stronger effect. So Dowhood at rank 6 then gives you the sleeper hold, where you can now, after successfully grappling someone, put them to sleep after a few rounds. And these things, like I said, can be influenced by an impact. So if I were to say use brutality with the grapple, now that I have him in a grapple, when it's my turn to do damage, I can do additional damage each round that I've done damage already. So combining these things is a really interesting, I guess, flavor to the combat. And then lastly, martial arts is also affected by your race. At ranks 4 and 8, your race grants you certain bonuses when you engage in martial art combat. Good example would be the humans. So at their 4th rank, once per day, when they successfully block against a melee attacker, they can disarm them. And that's specifically for humans at rank 4. So others can do something similar like that, but it's much more costly for them. At rank 8, humans can actually exchange their impact for another one for the period of a day, which allows them more versatility. For say, if they think they're going to be encountering an enemy that they just need to pile on the damage with, they could focus on brutality or rage impact. Whereas if they feel like they aren't going to be able to handle the encounters coming up for them, they could focus on, say, calm or something like that to help them change and adjust to the conflicts they may see in the future.
Yeah, that's a pretty good overview of it. And martial arts was written after doing a lot of research into real-world martial arts, and it's kind of a reflection of the many different variations we have. You know, you may have karate as one kind of martial art, but within that you have, you know, Kyokushin or geez, that's the only one I can think of when I actually need to talk about it. You may have a number of variations of karate that are all intended to accomplish different goals. And so that's kind of how martial arts was built. You have your base overarching styles that each can be slightly altered to yield a different effect.
We have
And
two
I guess,
questions.
and then one other thing about martial arts is that you can actually learn multiple styles and different impacts, and you essentially just have to retake the martial arts talent and choose a different combination of style and impact. So, I mean, there's that room to become like the ultimate martial artist if you so choose. But for each, I believe it's either a round or encounter, you have to choose which martial arts you are using. So you can't benefit from all the impacts simultaneously or all the styles simultaneously.
All right, we have two questions. Courtney asked, "What's everyone's favorite part of the game?" We have answered that at the beginning of the stream,
Kind of.
didn't we?
Sort
Kind
of. Favorite part, like,
yeah. Go ahead.
my favorite part of the game, I guess, would be more along the fact that if you're, you know, specking up to be some fighter and it's like suddenly you have this want or need to be something different, you can do that without any direct penalty. Like, I know D&D has a cross-class experience penalty and a whole bunch of well, relatively convoluted rule set for that. And it's just so much easier to combine, mix and match what style you want your character to be.
For me, it would be the cities and the world itself. I love how we've crafted a world that's dark, yet has a couple little, you know, bright light shining through of purity. Like Ravana are pretty pure as far as race goes, how young they are. Or even some of the vampire covens are all about being, you know, kind to everybody. There's little things, and there's also some tongue-in-cheek moments, like the coven that takes at takes up residence in Sylvan Hollow, which we actually didn't touch on the cities. It's interesting little tongue-in-cheek there.
I think my, I mean, I know I mentioned earlier that I really liked the fear system, but I think more than anything, I think that what I like about this game and this world is that it, by way of the story that we've started to craft, you know, with the Reckoning and things like that, we created a blank slate, and by not using some of the traditional races that you see in fantasy RPGs, like, you know, gnomes and dwarves and elves, etc., we've opened ourselves up, well, not only us, but you guys as well. We've opened, you know, a lot of doors for a lot of opportunity for not only storytelling, but system building and world exploration and things like that. So I think I just like how we made everything as open as we did.
I think for me,
Cut
You
out.
cut out again.
all my rage. All right, so testing 1, 2.
Yep.
All right, I think I just need to give like 10 seconds after like unmuting myself. I think piggybacking off of Zip's, you know, discussion about the openness, whatever you like, for me personally, is the classless system that we developed has easily been probably like the hardest part, because it's basically the core part of the game. You know, your character, which is what you need in order to play an RPG. But I think I just really like the ability to be able to, like, you know, Lost was saying, if you're a fighter, switch over and do something else. And that we didn't, instead of making a penalty, we tried to create synergies and trying to make ways that you could still be a fighter who has Arcana to augment his fighting abilities, to sit there and let you cross, quote unquote, cross class to your heart's content, and the only penalty is you making poor choices. I know throughout the development of this game, I've heard a lot that it's impossible to create a classless system. It's never going to work. It's always going to be broken, and you know, I've been shown examples of other ones that tried and failed or didn't succeed as well as you would think. And I mean, it's just kind of satisfying. And I mean, one, it's awesome that it works, and it's also satisfying to look back at those people and say, well, we did it. So
It can be done.
it just takes 5 years of testing.
You can argue things like Arcana is a class, or you know, martials are a class, but they're not. You're not restricted to it.
Right.
At any point, you can change completely, and as long as you don't spread yourself too thin with experience, you'll be viable. I mean, you know, don't spend everything on everything, because you won't be good at any.
Like, you will build your own class.
It'll always be your class, because
You
if
can
you make
always-
if I make a psyker and let's say Cody makes a psyker, they're going to be two completely different types.
Yep.
I think I gotta go with text on this one. Definitely my favorite part has been the world and the world creation, and it's basically the same thing I said last time this question was asked. The fact that we were able to kind of make something unique, even, you know, though there will always still be certain tropes that still are present in every work of fiction, we're still able to make something that I feel is it stands out, and a place that has its own feel, its own culture, that people can really dig into and really get excited about.
I know for me the openness of the weapons and armor and potions and traps even, and all those open crafting systems. There's no like, oh, this is how you build a sword, this is how you build a spear. It's like, no, this is how you get damage out, and you decide what it looks like. Or this is your armor, you get to decide what it looks like. There's no, oh, I got to get leather armor, but it doesn't look cool. But there's none of that. It's completely up to your imagination.
Yeah, you can sit there and really have like a mage rocking like full plate if that's what you want him to be wearing, with only a little bit of armor. Because if that's how you want it to look, to have that cool, you can have that like mental image in your head of like the cool like badass battle mage at like low experience, low session count, you know. But we're sit there and told like, nah, you get a robe and that's all you ever get. It kind of like until you're halfway through the game and you finally unlock some feat or feature, and you know, you gotta wait until your character looks or you feel like in your head how it's awesome. I don't know. We opened up the entire of everything actually.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about it, like the crafting, the characters, everything was kept with the same idea of you decide how you want it to work. We're just going to give you a lot of tools and some guides.
All right. Has everybody answered?
Yeah.
Next question is from Rhoda Fury. We talked about martial arts, like you said, and as well as prosthetic limbs. You guys, I believe, said that you were reworking it from which was currently in the playtest.
Did it
Have
change
we really
from there?
changed? I don't think we've
Well,
changed much to combat.
prosthetics wasn't actually in the playtest, if I recall correctly.
Prosthetic limbs, you say?
So I'll jump forward on that one, huh?
No, I think
I'm opening it.
I think it did get updated with the rest of the crafting overhaul.
That's right, it did. It did.
Yeah. We tweaked it a bit. We worked on some of it, but
wasn't as extensive as the rest of it, though.
no, it's
Sure.
not as extensive as some of the rest of the crafting disciplines, I guess. But it definitely got a pretty good rework. Looking in here, it looks like we almost doubled the amount of things that we could include, as well as kind of bring it more on track with some of the other crafting systems and somewhat their style of being created. But I'm not gonna lie, it has been a while since I've read front to cover to cover prosthetics. I'll own that one. Been in airship so long.
Amen.
Yeah, the biggest thing for them is that we gave it grades, so it's grade 1 through 5, and we streamlined the process of its base to those grades, and each grade has its own hard points, a health buffer because it can now get broken and stuff like that, and the maintenance that you have to perform on that. So each going back to each grade having hard points, that's the amount of attachments that you can add to it. So a couple of them are like climbing spikes, collapsible shield, a grappling hook, so you can have all sorts of unique different things with your prosthetic limb as long as you have enough of the hard points from the grade. That's the biggest change from it.
Okay. Next question is, how does combat work? Oh, so does combat work the same way it does this in Road of Fury? Does combat work the same? Yeah. Does the combat still work how it did? The amount of points you have and how initiative works. Either way, could you talk a little bit about that or how you came to the way you thought of this system? Basically, how does combat work? How do we get there?
Sure. Part of our goal with combat was to make it very team-oriented, and to that effect, I think that it affected a lot of how we handled the initiative, where we handle it more like, say, a turn-based strategy game than the random initiative where everybody kind of goes at their own turn. And this, we felt, added a bit more strategy to it, because you could combine maneuvers and tactics with the whole team, as opposed to kind of planning around the individual. So it encourages players to work together more, I feel, than the usual random initiative system.
For the record, if anyone's getting a lot of buffering, apologies. It's probably just my connection that's causing the problem.
Well, stop downloading stuff.
I am not downloading anything. I almost cursed, and then I remember we're up in Mythic Store.
Remember the other things we've said.
And I'm kind of surprised we're keeping it relatively clean. He says,
As he needs to take a shower. I know there's definitely some concern regarding like the initiative, the group initiative system that we have, regarding that mobs of enemies will pretty much always go first. It's something that we've tried to explore just to kind of let, alleviate some concern that we're doing nothing or it's been brushed under the table. Mostly me being the numbers guy, I've been sitting in the background, because the reason I'm the numbers guy is because I sit in the background and idly compute. But yes, there is that issue of if you're going up against, say, a party is going against 50 enemies, that the party will pretty much never win initiative. Me personally, I don't have a problem with that, because you got 50 people. Some of them are going to get the drop on you, and as you start defending, the rest of them will get to get their shots off if they can hit you in some way, shape, or form. But given most normal expected combats, it will be a little more on the even side. Monsters are not going to have as high initiative stats and rolls, but there is going to be more. Wow. 5 minutes? Okay. I'm going to just go ahead and do a call out time in a second when I get a minute count over. And then you guys can just type in when you hear this. So, actually, we'll clock out.
Yeah, that's.
Alrighty, I am getting. Note, my time is Pacific. Just a heads up for anyone doing a count over. So I am just now getting 4:40 p.m. Pacific time. You guys want to text out when you hear that in your times? Man, 5 minutes.
That's rough.
Yeah, it's not very conducive to a conversation.
I think it's because it's basically dinner time, so after dinner, everyone's getting on to YouTube and such. That's lagging it out.
Well, that, and I've had spotty broadcasting for my machine.
Everyone needs them Pokemon Go tutorials.
Yeah, they're still talking about people and culture from Conrad on their end.
Oh, jeez.
They're really far behind.
Actually, yeah.
I can mute and unmute the stream and see what happens.
Try refreshing the stream, maybe.
Like stop streaming and starting.
I don't know. That might actually screw up this part. Then let's quickly cover the last question, and then probably have to call it quits, and we'll type in chat about it.
Yep.
Last question is from Asha. She asks, the NPCs are featured in the art, our 4 NPCs. Who thought them up, created them? Do you have specific influences that affected their design?
Check out NPCs in the art. Oh,
yeah.
The bar. Oh my god.
No, not the bar. The Raish and Lorelei, etc.
Yeah.
Terra. Well, I've said before, Terash was based off of.
Yeah. So the idea behind the 4 NPCs that we have on that piece of art was to kind of have an example group to use throughout the book to kind of explain how the various mechanics work and what a team might look like. So you have Terash, which is the ellipse, Marshal of Love, as explained earlier in this broadcast we were talking about. He carries the team through a lot of social encounters, and when he can't, uses his whip of love. You have... Actually, I don't have the image in front of me. That's a problem.
It's always a problem when you can't get the image up.
Yeah. But we had... Do you remember the vampire's name, Tex? Lorelei?
Lorelei Ver Aricasa.
Yes, Lorelei Ver Aricasa, who is a vampire martial artist.
Yes.
Kind of playing off of... it's a good way to explain how the martial arts system works through her, and kind of how race can really impact how one behaves in combat. So that was kind of our goal there with that. For the other two, we had the Rekindled... What was his name?
Raish was the
Wretched.
Wretched. We had Terash, and we had... Quick, Google Drive.
His name is Risk.
Risk. Right.
Yes. So we have Risk, the Rekindled Rogue, would probably be the best description for him.
Thief.
Yeah.
He is that very nimble fighter. Who's kind of been living the down and dirty life. And so that was a way for us to explain a lot of the out of combat activities and skills, as well as kind of give people that everyone loves a rogue. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And rogues are, a quintessential part of the role-playing experience, so we had to make sure we had one out there. Raish is probably my favorite out of the 4, not because she's particularly special, but because she does a good job of demonstrating how you can create literally whatever character you want. Raish is a shotgun-toting primal Thurgist Wretched, which basically means she makes a lot of things go boom all the time.
Yep.
If she's not shooting someone, she's throwing, fireballs, casting lightning. So she does a lot of damage, but she's, again, a great example of how you can literally make exactly what you want and play exactly what you want in this system.
Yep.
And that's exciting.
Yep. More on the top level, less on the level of each individual character. When working on, picking what pieces of art we were going to get in the book, I know that, I look at, despite what we may have, alluded to about some of our misgivings about D20 systems, I have a very deep love for Pathfinder. I played
Absolutely.
I played D&D 3.5 before I tried out Pathfinder for the first time, and when I played Pathfinder, I fell in love with it, and largely because I love Pathfinder's art. And, delving into Pathfinder, I was, noticing the same characters over and over again. These, I guess, face characters, you could call them, that kind of represented the game and the player's experience over the course of reading the rules, like Conrad had alluded to. So I knew, understanding that, I know I personally wanted to get kind of like a band of these sort of face characters that could help represent everything of the game. And, you would, reading through the book, you would find these characters doing different things, learning new things, and kind of growing over the course of reading the rules.
Awesome. Sweet.
Oh.
So I think that's gonna about wrap it up for us with these audio issues and everything.
Yep.
So thank you all for joining us for this.
Thank you all for coming.
There was
Thank you
some
for the question.
awesome friggin' questions.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
See you guys.
Thank you. Yep, thank you for everything.
Yeah, it was a great
Thank
time,
you.
y'all. And as always, head over to the forum if you have any questions or comments or want to keep asking or learn more.
Also, we have a Discord chat for those of you who are listening later on. You can find it on our forums, on our website, and we'll also have it in the description later. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.